Monkey Radio. We're with Sevan tonight, James Evan Bomar the third, and you guys, all of our loyal monkey listeners are quite familiar with who you are. And so I'm going to leave the bio at that. And if you guys want to know any more out, there are absolutely links on the webpage here that you can get to Sevan's site and check things out. His website, and probably a great place to start at with his work is the resistance2010.com. And there's definitely a link below. There's also astralquest.com and secretenergy.com that are also his sites. Some amazing work going on there, and some openings of the conscious mind happen on a daily basis within that community. And I've been witness to watching some of the dialogue going on in some of the forums, and just energetically feeling into some of the conversations that are going on there, Sevan. I am amazed at some of the things that are happening there on your site. So,
oh yeah, for sure. And, I definitely want to congratulate everyone on the site too, because I jumped in there today, just to talk to someone that I know that's constantly moderating things. And then I was, checking on stuff because, of course, we've been building the site, so I haven't had as much time as I would like to pay attention to what's going on the site and to comment, to answer questions as I normally do. And but it was just amazing to see how you really can just leave it, and people really assist each other. Nobody's taking it for a game, so each person is respecting where another individual is coming from. And then you got a lot of people that are diving in, and it's really their first time hearing this, or they've been in this for about a year tops, and they're getting a lot of assistance from others who've not only picked up on the message that we've been bringing, but also have been connecting it with their own things intuitively. And so we do have a real platform full of real-time adepts, based on what's going on right now today and at this moment, which we find to be most relevant. So, I just have a major love, and that love just develops and it grows more every day, and compassion grows more every day as I, come out of my own shell and come out of my own dullness at times, and just allow the energy of the collective to really, really to start to bathe me, in every tense.
Yeah. Something that I've noted about those sites and the forums and the dialogue that's going on there that is different from the majority of the other forums and platforms that are out there is the lack of drama.
Oh, yeah.
There's an energy there with what you're putting together, and what the what's happening there. There's an energy of community. There's an energy of love. There's an energy of cooperation and collaboration that is I haven't found it to this caliber anywhere else, Sevan. So
well, it's I would definitely say that was in major part to, when we began the site, we really set the bar at that it was going to be no nonsense. We have certain protocols, like, you can't just go post some crazy sigil as your avatar or some other being as your avatar. And then, if you get a little nuts, then you can probably be escorted out of the platform. You still can see everything that's there, but you just can't communicate with anybody. And I guess that kind of said really clear from the beginning that, look, we're here to expand you. All the rest of the stuff that goes on in other places, which is generally due to just slacky protocols and a false idea of democracy, meaning, people can just basically say anything. After all, it's a democracy, right? But, that doesn't fly when you got, real people that, their life is at stake with this. It's changing their lives, and they're looking for the next level of it, and someone standing in their way just becomes, whatever the most negative force that they could ever come up with in their mind. And so just moving that out of people's way and allowing them to be able to gel with each other and to really start to share that connection, man. It's been awesome.
It's good stuff. One more bit of business before we head off into some conscious conversation. We do not have Ramon with us tonight for our listeners out there. He is He is experiencing a bit of a toothache this evening, and so if all you guys out there, by the time this airs, I'm sure it'll be all healed and everything. But time is a fickle thing, and I'm sure that the energy that's being going to be put out this Sunday is going to reach back in time and help Ramon out with what he's going through right now. And let's definitely send some good energy that way. So,
Definitely.
so Sevan. I'm gonna the stage is yours tonight, but there's one thing that I would kind of like for you to kind of touch on through the evening is some of the obstacles that we find on this path, the conscious path. Once we actually firmly get our feet on the path, and we are consciously and actively pursuing that inner growth and that inner wisdom, the growth of that within self, within the being. We there are some pretty significant obstacles that we come across, and I've noted myself that there are some commonalities and some very common threads out there that people run into.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, because, they're just going to be running into themselves. I mean, I guess the most
Exactly.
disastrous thing on the path can really be oneself. And, that'll be definitely clear by, the end of tonight's show. And, I will let everyone know, just take a drink of water real quick here, is, as we progress through the conversation, I'm looking to make some major headway tonight. I'm looking to do something epic because I feel like, every time people get involved with the spirituality stuff, they end up like turning into Saturn aliens or something, meaning that their whole emotional system is like defunct and they don't know how to get in there and really, really get the energy going anymore. It's like it's either doom and gloom or it's some fairy tale. So we'd like to really fit ourselves in the balance of that. And so really tonight, we're going to talk about how to really achieve the zone, the zen, the balance, etc. I actually dubbed tonight's show, whether to stick or not, or whether it be a later show, The Return of the Starmaker. And that has nothing to do with me. So some people were saying, oh, he's calling himself the Starmaker now. It actually has to do with what's coming from within yourself. So in every tense of what I was saying, it's all of us rather than it being just me. The Return of the Starmaker is when you understand personally what your opinions are. That means like, what are your points of your organism and what is the points of your existence? And then you start to basically grab something and move those points in order for you to interact with, more than just your specific point of the spectrum that you tend to hang on. And I'll say everyone, until making it into the center of their consciousness, may have a little bit of difficult time grasping what's presented tonight because, seeing is believing in this dimension. But in reality, this is something that you can't even see with two eyes. You have to experience it because experience comes with the feeling. Experience is the real gnosis. So moving right along, first of all, I think that this has got to be an adult conversation tonight. It's got to be an adept conversation, meaning that there's certain things that we're just going to have to really agree to before we even can start making sense of a lot of this stuff. And one of those major things is how the human being personally as a creation on this plane functions with both capacities of what we would call light and dark or good and evil or whatever two opposite poles. Because what happens even if I say the word evil, because it has so many programs attached to it and around it, the person immediately gets an idea of really the worst thing and then they start going from that. But that's when you're so deep into the division, that's what really evil is, that you can't even really pay attention to what's going on because it's so chaotic. But when you really start pulling out of that, you see a lot of connections with really everything in the dualistic plane. And that's either it's yin or yang, either it's supposedly quote unquote good or bad. And what happens with these worlds, because there's probably a infinite amount of these or Googleplex amount of these or whatever word you can give that means the highest number, there's going to be that many of these worlds. But if you have a craving for something like I do, there's being a connoisseur of spirituality, you're looking for the oneness, you're looking for the actual central point, the balance, the zen, the full perpetual energy center, the all-knowing, the omniscience. We've created a lot of words for this, but can we achieve this? And so tonight we're going to be talking about how to achieve this I'm obviously an individual that's achieved it already, and I think that that's very important, because if I say, oh, tonight we're going to talk about love, but I haven't loved anybody before, how am I going to teach you about something that I haven't even experienced? So I would tell everyone that, I'm very cool about this. Some people know I can get to ranting and raving, and I calm that down a lot within the last 2 years, because people need to hear you through all of that. So when I want to explain, it may seem like I wouldn't even be able to sit here and talk to you clearly like I'm doing right now, and that may make you believe that maybe I haven't experienced that. But I'll tell you the truth, that I wouldn't even have gotten on this radio and started talking about this message, or even 5 years ago starting the resistance and writing the Code of the Matrix. I wouldn't even have done any of that if it wasn't about something viable, because I'm just not constructed that way. I'm not built that way. I'm not a person that has had really a major trouble with getting around in the reality. I won't say the reality has been kind to me, but what I'm saying is I know how to function in the reality. I have a lot of skill sets, so I can go and do different things and accomplish what most people want to accomplish, i.e. money. But this is about beyond money. This is not about me needing something from you. So I just want basically people to erase all that from their mind. I'm not trying to get you onto the side. I'm not trying to sign you up to something. What I'm doing here is I'm fulfilling something that I promised out of integrity to the universe, which is basically, if you come in here and you start eating these snacks, eating these fruits, eating all this stuff, and then you're getting taken care of, you're warm at night, the sun's warming you, all this kind of support system, then you end up having to balance that out at some point. And what I'm talking about is that for some people, Earth can be considered a 5-star hotel. Obviously, many people don't see it that way. They want to check out. But in reality, especially the people from the Western Hemisphere, are towards the north, really, which is what caused that. Just like you can see the north area of your body doesn't have to really process much toxins. It gets a chance to enjoy, like the eyes and the ears and the nose. It gets a chance to enjoy the entire surroundings, why the lower areas have to process all of what you ate during that night when you ate the French food, or, all of the different desires that we fulfill with the upper area of the body. The lower area of the body tends to have to carry that weight. So in the northern regions, generally you find people that are well-to-do. And in that stage, then you accrue a very high bill in many tenses. And some people don't see it that way. But the reality is if you start getting pampered and you start getting entrained into an illusion, then you got to go back down that entire path, and sometimes even wean yourself off of certain things before you can actually begin to see the balance point. So in a certain tense, all of this is very similar to the structures of things like banking and things like governments. That doesn't end in anything that you can see in the physical eye, including those other planets out there. And so the reality is the system may be working better and more perfected in what they call the first heaven, but that also means the first haven, meaning the first place that the beings went when they went into duality. Right? So that's why they always say, well, God's up there, or Deus or Zeus or the divided being is up there in the first heaven. But the first heaven is still denoted as basically one of the lowest places you can really get to, because you're coming out of totality. You're coming out of all connectedness, oneness. And so let me show you how this human being thing works about the good and evil. Now, I can be in the shower. I can think I'm doing good hygiene, obviously, to do a good job for the people that I'm going to meet, so I don't smell and not accumulate a bunch of bacteria, etc. So I'm doing good, right? Until I flush about 30 to 40 gallons down the sink that nobody is going to be able to really recoup on, mainly those people that are out there in those countries that they're running out of water in 2 weeks, or the waters is completely contaminated. They just want to drop, right? So I'm doing good. Or what if I go and join up with the Red Cross and I go fly out and I start healing all these people and working with my time and all that kind of thing. But meanwhile, JD, Mr. Rockefeller and Dickleby are sitting back there reaping all the major benefits from the loans and the donations that are coming in, right? But I'm doing good, right? So see, what happens is that we have this ability to really look at only what we think is correct and good. And that's, of course, still opinionated, but that's our thing. We only look at what is really good about us, but we don't see the shadow. So thus, if we never take a moment to look at that, then we also don't see the other side of this coin in this dualistic world. And that's what keeps us trapped. We remain in a polarity where we begin to basically only see how things are right, not left, Notice the terminology here. You're literally saying everything that's good is one specific direction, while everything that's bad is in another direction. So if you polarize yourself or weigh too much into one area, then you come out of balance. And out of balance is out of balance. I don't really care what you're doing. And I like the way a friend expressed it to me. He said, look, the universe, it doesn't really care what the story is. It's only reading your frequency. So whatever caused you to get into a certain frequency, that's not the language the universe speaks. The universe speaks frequency. So if you get into that frequency, you're going to be in there. So I want to talk about something about, just to clear the plate for most people before we even begin, about judging yourself. Now, in the deep levels of the cult, what you'll find is that they say the final being that you tend to run into when you're on your way out of here, and everyone will leave, and they maybe come back at some point, but you will leave, is the being known as the dweller, also known as the dweller of the threshold. And the exact identity of this being has been very similar to some kind of reaper or the devil or something like that. But when you have the works in front of you that actually explain it in more detail, it says that it's basically an accuser or a judge. And what this supposedly at this point external being does is continuously show you all the situations that you already know that you've done in life that have judged you to not be fit to make it beyond this dimension, right? And so this is what they say, that the dweller of the threshold stands at the gate, and that if it turns you back, then that's when you go through this next incarnation. You go through another incarnation. So we now have discovered, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that what this being is particularly is something that we're creating based on this same idealism of this good and bad, which actually creates a lock, even a guard, that doesn't allow us to get out of this circle. Later, we're going to talk about how time is not a straight line. It's a circle. A lot of people see it as a straight line, that it goes back infinitely and it goes forward infinitely. No, that's not the truth. Time is a circle. It only got invented inside of a cycle. It is a course, meaning a lesson that you need to learn and know nothing more. So going deeper into this judgment, okay, what we find is that this is not just about you telling someone else that, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that, or you're telling someone else that, oh, I don't like this person. This is the surface level of what judgment does. There's much deeper levels of judgment. And this is why the old time script says, judge and ye shall be judged. And what this is literally a riddle for perpetual motion. The moment that you actually make that judgment, then something that has a tendency to be the opposite energy will come back at you at a certain point. So as long as you're making judgments, then you're always going to be judged. And these judgments and judgings is something like a motor. Once you do it one time, then something else comes back. That makes you do it again, then you come back. So even if you notice in certain families, if someone kills someone, the judgment of hatred against that other family will lock these two families into almost infinite incarnations of each of them trying to get back at one another and continuously judging one another. So when I tell you it's in everything, it's in the language. The moment that we start to talk, we generally are already judging something. Even if I say glass, it's denoting a glass from a pot or something that's one way to something that's another. And people may think that that's extreme. But that's exactly how tight the grip is here of what we're doing. Because this judgment stems into the yin and yang. Like, you got to think about what you're doing. When you say one thing that you want and one thing that you don't, you're now cutting it. So you've now, in a sense, made the division. So this places you, and this is what I recently discovered, that the term God, and why they were trying to throw even that title off on the human being, saying ye are gods, because it was tied to that, because gods are dualistic, that humans are dualistic, and that now they know the knowledge of good and evil, so they're like gods. Right. You say on the text, you say, oh, you know the knowledge of good and evil, now you are like gods, meaning that, you guys now have the problem of the same beings that are actually in this plane with us, that think And then they show you the mentality, I'm the only one and there's no other before me. You all this and this and this. And so you watch, this is a world stage then, baby. A world stage where they're playing a game of duality, smile now, cry later, big time drama. And then we've gotten so into this act that we don't realize the real lies, like it's an oxymoron. We don't realize that we've bought into a huge illusion. And even expecting something out of this automatically puts the person on one pole or the other pole, because if you really understand what's going on, there's nothing wrong. It's only when you start looking at this reality, oh, if it was just better, and if this was just like this, and this was like, whoa, what are we talking about here? You talking about the dual plane? The moment you create better, someone has to create the opposite. That's the only way even anyone knows how that you've even created something. Something has to highlight that. So if I say wheat germ is good, someone will pop up and say wheat germ is horrible. And our interlocking battle will serve to make wheat germ more known. That's from its good aspect and its bad aspect. So that's the whole thing then, my friends. And again, it becomes an addiction. So what happens is that it's gotten very graduated, this judgment thing. Now I'll show you how wired in it is. Of course, in the Old Testament, most popular book in the world, not the New Testament, the Old Testament, because it's still in more circulation. So the Old Testament, it talks about the judges. And it gives people how many judges are there. How many judges in the Bible? 12. Okay, so why are they using that number? It's 12 signs to the zodiac. See, they're not talking about per se physical men. What they're talking about is archetypes, meaning energies that influence the way that a person comes out, meaning that's the real judgment. Something that influence the way that you come out. And this is why the zodiac signs, if you see a person under the sign of Scorpio, there tends to be a certain kind of character tied into that person 95% of the time. You see what I mean? So you can basically base a person's temperament, their attitude, how they're going to react, basically their judgment on what sign or house they've come from. Okay, so where they've been judged to go next because they were judging. So here's another thing. If you notice in mysticism, they always talk about that there is another plane, but there's a gate there. And then there's something guarding that gate. And then they try to give it always the most crazy and the most ferocious kind of appearance, and that everyone is afraid of it. And it's because it's themselves. Never will a person see how much they're afraid of until they close their eyes with the third eye on. Meaning that what we're actually dealing with inside of ourselves that is making so many people external and just completely run away from what's inside is all of the monsters that have been consumed in this reality that has been fed to us day after day, whether the monsters in the food, some kind of chemical, some kind of worm, the monsters in the media, real monsters on TV, they're showing it and flashing it, the monsters at every single corner. So what that makes is it makes a society that is ready to go outside and judge someone else, because the last thing they want to do is judge themselves. But these days, I'll tell you, the best thing that we can do is begin to judge ourselves very briefly and to realize very, very fast that the grace is sufficient. And I'll explain that very deeply, because a lot of these texts, and more finding out more and more every day, like I've read the Bible 3 times and just, kind of cast it away from me for a while and just looked at into deeper things. But in going back to it and realizing some of the things that are written, it's proving to be very paramount in realizing exactly how people get stranded, and even how I've been stranded onto this dimension. So it's a very important thing. You know what? I'll come back to that in just a minute. What I really want people to see is that what you're wrestling against here, if you have any kind of opponent, is your flesh. And the reason is the flesh, who's connected to reptilian, connected to Aquarian, connected to everything you see as animalistic on that zodiac, is a lot more convinced about what it is than the mind. And only the soul knows better. And let me explain that again. The mind is like a puff of cloud based on how much it really believes in the illusion, whatever you've accepted as some kind of spiritual theism. People have not experienced anything like spirituality, especially if they've only been looking external for some kind of phenomena or some kind of feeling externally that will cause that, no matter what it is. So this lets us all see very clearly that the dense body, who's gone through complete metamorphosis from amoeba to apex predator, that kinds of status, meaning in the DNA string, that kind of resilience of its existence, that's what you're actually attempting to explain, that there is something greater. Okay, so I want people to see that very clearly, that all of what they keep talking about, again, reptilian, mammalian, and the thousands of years that have gone through this evolution is not a lie. And this body has developed a certain stage of consciousness, but surely it doesn't even compare to where the soul is. The soul tells you where it is by its word. It's in one. Okay, so what we're seeing is we're seeing now that the dense body is trying to stay and believes that this is the only thing that actually exists. And what our mind is attempting to do is become strong enough to connect the dense body or introduce the dense body to the soul and to the possibility of living on rather than perishing like everything of flesh does. So getting into this, I want to talk about very briefly how time is not as we think. And I'm not talking about that it just being a circle, but that it's also in every tense of what I'm saying, a frequency. Because what I witness with my own single eye, not my own two eyes, was that other objects that are in this reality, like trees, begin to come alive when you begin to move on the frequency that they're on. So you can actually be looking at what would appear to be a dead tree. And then when you turn on your faculties and start to go into the frequencies of where that tree is still alive, that tree starts to come alive. And this is very paramount to what has been going on in this reality and for us to understand time fully and complete, because it actually gives you the ability to begin to rewind time and actually do away with time altogether. And to also really look deeper into exactly how our reality around us is actually functioning based on the frequency. And then that frequency is changing what we call time and making things faster or slower or changing our experience. So I want to take a moment here, just to allow you to speak into, because all of these things I'm just skating over a little bit, so that within this second half, as we always do, we can drill into these a little bit more and to start really, really pulling out how all this stuff is put together, because this is now time for it to happen. It can happen. And that's just, of course, if I can, clear my mind and keep clear enough during the conversation to be bringing this back into duality. And so people need to understand this. Like, don't look at what I'm saying and wonder if it's actually making sense. Hope that I actually get a chance to put the right words together to allow it to make sense to you, because I know what I'm talking about. But the reality is I'm talking. So what I'm doing right away is I'm putting it into duality. And I'll give you another way of looking at that. A 0 and a 1. Okay, they call this the digital world. Now, the digital begins with DI, and we've seen that word before. It's called die, meaning to split into two, or dice, two dice. Die or deuce is all the same word. It means two. So if you look into computers, the reason why they're digital is because they consist of a 0 and a 1. Okay? So that means that the moment that I even function on duality, if I function on the good and the bad, the light and the dark, I'm now in the digital world, which is an illusion. So this digital world you're seeing in the computer, it's just a mirror for the digital world of the robots rebellion, or the people here that have been connected to a good, evil, dualistic mentality that have become automatonly robotic and now are functioning on perpetual energy until they break down. And then they're built again and reanimated, and then they give it another shot. You see what I mean? So what I'm telling people is that while we're looking at the computers and wondering if they're going to try to incept the reality, as far as it being digital, this reality is already digital because it functions on duality. And the computers were just a shadow of what was already being done in the spiritual realm on these lower planes. Okay. And to go on, how you would see these realities then is they look like webs. See, when a grander projection that contains tons of components, chairs, computers, tables, good, evil, grass, all these kind of things, it comes out like a web. They used to call this the web of Gaia. And when it's cast over you, just like in a dream, you then perceive the energies that you're seeing, which are really coming in as light, as more denser objects, and thus begin based on your experience. So if you've only seen a chair before, you interpret almost all energies as chairs. Okay, and this is very important to know, like what other animals are tend to be seeing and other lower organisms are seeing everything as one thing almost. Why? Because they haven't gained the faculties yet to distinguish cut, shape, carve, which again, the language is the key power to doing that. Cut, shape, and carve it out as something else and begin to build it. So I'm going to rewind here, and I'm going to talk about Cain and Abel, because this is a very important metaphor to understand.
Hey, Sevan, real quick before you go into Cain and Abel, I have one question about something you talked about a bit ago, and the gatekeeper beyond the veil of life, right? That judge. Now, in my experience and what I have found in my own personal research and through discussion and conversations with others, is that this gatekeeper, and I agree 100% that this is a creation of ourselves. This is something that we are creating for ourselves. But the question that I do have with even for myself is, do we have the ability to embody a separate, or a perception of a separate individuality or
for sure. We do it all the time in the dream. Like everything that you're seeing in the dream as a universe is what you're creating. And in almost 95% of the cases, unless you're dealing with a trained adept that knows how to get into your own projection and speak to you inside of there, and that's also generally very vivid when something like that occurs, all of those characters are being built up to take you into generally the greatest fear. That's what most people tend to experience, is whatever they fear the most. There's a whole dream cooked up where that starts going on, with even individuals playing roles that they've never seen before. So It's important to understand that this dweller, the threshold, the judge, et cetera, is a specific frequency. And so when someone phase locks in that frequency, mainly leaving the body and being afraid of what's going to happen next, that's really the case that most people experience when they're about to leave here. They don't leave easily like, oh, okay, great, it's finally time. I'm about to ease up out of this thing and ease on down the road. You know, it's not like that. It's more like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? I'm sorry, Kate. You know, so in that tense, the dweller is there because the dweller is a frequency. It will always remain there, just like, you know, there's always a foundation to a pyramid, right? And then so what happens is in order to collapse this being, you know, in certain tenses, the term my grace is sufficient is important, because people need to understand that when you're even doing things like prayer, you're really talking to your higher self, or the more perfected version of yourself. And when you realize that, you get a lot more out of those kind of cycling of your higher energy to your lower energy. But that whole term, the grace is sufficient, is meaning that don't believe that there's anything that you could have ever done that would allow the totality of all things to all of a sudden not welcome you back into the totality. It's not even a question. And on top of that, it's not even two different places. We're just in an illusion. We're separating ourselves based on this guilt, based on this fear. And then we've adapted into frequencies that harvest those kind of things, which are separate from, hey, what's to be guilty about? Like, what's the big deal, man? Like, what is your problem? The whole level of the comprehension of the ego. And so, you know, this is also something, the next thing, like I was, you know, just what I'll tell people, like, it's way different. Like, it's all energetics, and we need to be together when we're experiencing that. So it's not even something to start talking about, oh, it was beautiful and the sun was, come on, what are you talking about? Another plane? Are you talking about another planet again? Because what we understand to be beyond this is pure energy. It's undivided. And to even be able to get the faculties to comprehend that would even be us understanding where nothing comes from, which seems to be beyond anyone that I bumped into around here. I can even explain it, but that doesn't mean that I've gotten any further, because of course I can explain you came from, why you can't comprehend what was going on when you came from nothing is because you didn't have any senses. Senses is what makes you comprehend. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch are the swords even of the pentagram that you're using in order to cut out a phi-based reality. And then there's many facts to numbers also. Like the reason why the number 7 becomes significant is because there's 7 different entry and exit points from your sphere. Look at your head. This is the main sphere, the prime globe or prime mobile, right? So you got 2 eyes, two ears, you got 2 holes in your nose, and then what? 1 mouth. Letting us see what is really responsible for bringing all these forces together, our mouths. So what frequency comes out of the mouth tends to exhibit where exactly the person's stage of consciousness is, and if whether or not they have achieved balance. And wise people, they just let you sit down and talk, because they can see right from there, what your issue may be and how they can help you. And that's really the only thing that they're really concerned about, not so much as small talk. But this is of course, it's an amazing thing to get to this point to begin to comprehend this, but to begin to do the real work, like getting rid of the dweller of the threshold, means that you literally are looking at every single situation from one point and understanding how you're just judging everything, and how when judging goes on, it stops you from wherever you started judging at. So you can go through you may not even get to the beginning of the book before you already judge. This guy's a Rosicrucian. He must be a part of secret society. I'm reading it. So you throw it away, never realizing that this may be the guy that actually gave them all the knowledge that they have before they got usurped by Weishaupt and the rest of those guys. Because you just don't know the whole story. And that just tends to happen with judges. Judges tend to not listen to the whole story before they are already judging. Think about the courthouse judge. He doesn't listen to about the kid that was raised in the crazy household with the dad that was a drug addict, and then they beat on him, and then that's why he left the house early, learned to steal. Then he stole somebody's car and he's there. They judge, did he actually steal the car or not? You see, so they're judging falsely. So how to get out of that jurisdiction, because you'll be hearing, that's what they call it, a hearing. You'll be hearing all of this judgment for a prolonged period of time with these basically pretend hermaphrodites. That's why they're wearing dresses and why they're wearing wigs at times, because they're trying to be in the image of the king, who's Cain. So this is why I was explaining a little bit earlier, because it gets into a little bit more about how to pull apart the dweller of the threshold, is to understand that inside of your temple, in your consciousness on the dual sides, there's a Cain and there's an Abel. This was easier seen, especially in Gnostic tradition, as a sheep and a goat, because they got different personalities. And then on top of that, that's why the goats later on became known as the Masons. That's why there's all this relationship to the goat, and even the pentagram being turned upside down being called the goat, because the pentagram right side up is called the sheep, you see? And these different perspectives of the person's character is like this. Cain wanted to build the temple. Cain was not interested in believing that there was going to be some higher power that was going to come and sustain everyone, et cetera, et cetera. Cain was going to build all of that if it was ever to come pass. Why Abel, which is why his offering was accepted, was like, it's whatever you want. I'm ready and willing. I'm able. So if it's going to come, it's going to come. What you've given me is all I need. And when it's time for me to go, I'll go. So you see, you have two adverse polarities. You have basically left brain, right brain, but on a deeply occult level. So in every tense, we do need to find the balance between the Cain and Abel of our consciousness, because many taking in this new age wave have gone really far to the right. But that was part of the plan, because if you've been in duality, what we call peace, if we've been in duality for a prolonged period of time, then the thing you really need is a little bit of wholeness, because that swings you into the opposite sphere for a while, so you can see exactly what the contrast is to where you've been. So these manifest as numbers. I call it 0, 1, 2. To me, there's no other numbers higher than 0, 1, 2. And I'll explain, because the wholeness, which is, first of all, let me explain peace so people get that. Now, when you ask for peace, which this world has termed as being cool and docile and nothing's going wrong and everything is beautiful, which is never could be true. Peace is a part of something, not the whole thing. So with just peace, you basically have the first act of duality. That's why the whole peace thing came from the papacy. It came from the Pope. It came from those with the P, because they use that symbol, that's the Chiro. They use the actual symbol P as a call sign, okay? So the peace, which they hold up with two fingers when you're holding it up, is actually the symbol of dualism. It means basically the concept of the United Nations. It will all be able to live well together after this next war. And it has done that for millions, billions, who knows how long, this acts of peace. So the only other pole is zero. We call that the rabbit hole. That's basically when you just assume that if you do opposite to what everyone else is doing, maybe you'll come up to it something, because everyone, by your conclusion, is surely going in the wrong direction. But this then turns you inside, right? And this is like synonymous with the monk going into the cave. But inside to what? Because now you got to figure out a lot of stuff. That's why they call it the rabbit hole. Now, just because you've gone within doesn't mean you know what's going on. And they say that this is synonymous with, some people believe that when they get to this next plane, right, this astral plane, that when they can get there and they can learn how to operate there and they start learning everything about that place, that they'll be in much better condition. This is foolishness. Because look at what we did here. We thought the same thing. When we got to this planet, we were going to learn everything just like the scientists claim that they know now, and then we're going to map it all out, and then it was going to be happiness. But that's not what's going on. So what makes us think that that's going to happen on this next level if we keep taking the same things that we've done on this level, anything, to that level? All this has got to stay here. It's not just, well, wait, I got to get the ring that my grandmama gave me. Wait, my husband, he was still there. Wait, no. Nothing will be going. All this is contaminated with duality. Like, this is what you're trying to get away from, whether you understand it or not. Now, there's no rush, because there's no such thing as time. But do get on your way. Because think about what I'm saying. When I say there's no such thing as time, I'm meaning that directly. There is no such thing as time. But if somehow you've been in it, you better get some stuff together very fast. You better make a jailbreak fast, because anytime time is in the equation, time will run out. So you need to get to a space where there's no time. And I'm happy to say that that space does exist. So realize what wholeness bought 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever we began that, even that term, is it was swinging people out of the peace hemisphere into the complete thing, which was like a rabbit hole. We tried to dissect it with numbers, letters, animals, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, like it was just so vast. Wholeness. Think about what you're talking about. It's a portal to infinitum, but it's not oneness. And that's what's coming next. Oneness is the integer. It is what it is. Look at it. It's a straight line. So I told you that time runs in a circle. So a straight line must be the way out. Why? Because it's like a needle. It pops the bubble. It's the balance. It's the zen. It's really at the moment. When somebody say, hey, man, you straight? Yeah, I'm straight. That's balance. You see what I mean? So, and it makes perfect sense, because this gives us the symbol of what the pyramid really means. On one bottom, let's say the bottom left corner is the 0. On the bottom right corner, there's the 2. Now, automatically the brain rejects that. So no, 1 comes next. No, it doesn't. See, it's all mixed up. Let me just tell you what's going on. 0 on one side, because 0 will always battle 2. Wholeness will always battle peace, because it just seems not right. But what you need to do is you need to get to 1. That is the top of the pyramid. That is the tip. That's when, and remember, the pyramid is then the whole body. You got 0, 2, and 1, and there's only really one way out. You see me? There's one way out of duality is right to them. And that's why I say anyone that's on this level, the metaphor is there's no one left. That's why I was saying on one of my last shows that in all these holograms, the only thing always missing is one thing, mainly God. I said, where's God? Oh, God's not here. Well, why not? Well, it's because that supreme being is one. And because we're in duality, we can't be where it is. We've figured out a way to sever ourselves from that to learn this lesson in this university about what? Some people are always looking for the meaning of life. There can only be one meaning to life. To learn how to get out of duality. The main component of physical worlds is the yin and the yang, is the phi, is the 72 degrees times 5, the pentagram, the perfect circle. It is the equations, even all the mathematical expressions, the numbers, which make a person numb. You can count ad infinitum until you get tired and fall out on the floor and throw up. You can keep counting. So that lets us see it's in the wrong direction. And guess what? If time wasn't going to run out and wasn't limited, then nobody would die. Because our perception of time would be, it's ad infinitum. That's not what time teaches. Time is a frequency. And it teaches us that if you don't maintain mainly above the speed of light, because when you get below the speed of light, all the creations and manifestations start. So if you can stay above the speed of light in your consciousness, then you won't what's called age, because you won't be in time. You won't make errors because there will be no era or units of time. So thus, if you can't make an error, then there's no judgment, because there's no lower frequency to sit here and tell you that you've done something wrong in your own mind, in your temple. How dare you let something come in your temple and tell you and accuse you? You need to be doing that on your own if you really understand and understand what exactly is going on here. And the reason why someone may judge you non-efficient. And that's where this whole thing comes in with the sovereign. And the whole thing comes in with this constant graduated system of teaching a person how to be a slave, right? Because that's when they've judged you not a free man. You see? So this is integral stuff. And we're going to keep moving through this because it's so integral. It's just so integral. I'm going to take a moment, though, because, I kind of skipped forward a little bit here through my thing, because we need to talk about these webs of projection. Because now if you look on the front door of the Bohemian Grove, it says, spiders, weave not thy web here. And in fact, if you take every single other first letter and you read it, it says something else too. But it's a riddle for saying. Jabulon, who is the spider, is the metaphor, is weaving webs or matrices that other souls are getting trapped in that are not a part of this club or custom of worshiping this owl. Okay? So this is just, it could be some Boy Scouts that put something together. Who cares what it is or how it began? We need to understand what it's become. But then if you go in non-biased though, and this is what the key is to all the knowledge. These are the two keys of Peter, the gold key and the silver key. If you go in non-biased, you get a chance to understand the entire thing. You get a chance to even see the web work, meaning that if someone casts a net of a projection over you, it comes out like a cymatic and it wraps around you and then starts to make you perceive the reality as it isn't how it isn't really. Okay. And then, after a while, it starts to look like a yarn ball. You got so many webs cast over you. Think about it. Like, it's down to an nth of a micron, like whatever they call the size of an atom. Imagine a web that's weaved that's that small, and then those kind of webs cast over an individual ad infinitum till those webs end up becoming shells, trapping the individual so far away from who they really are they can't break out. But then the prison break starts. See, I already realized this. Like, this is 5-6 years into making the prison break. And it happened because I happened to get myself into a little bit of trouble and I went to prison. And then when I got out, it was only like 2, because I waxed strong in spirituality while I was away. And when I came home, though, that frequency of being in a prison didn't go away necessarily. And then I had to scan it. Like, why isn't the frequency of prison gone away yet? And it took me 2 years to finally get a feedback on what that scan was about. But basically that scan entailed it's an illusion. Everything that you think you are, this name they gave you, Your parents gave you the name based on someone else that gave them the name, that gave them the name, that they may have liked, that got the name from somebody else that they liked, that gave them the name. You see what I'm talking about? So you basically even can have the same name as somebody else and you're calling yourself unique. All those things must be cast away, meaning any kinds of identification with redundancy need to be cast away. But remember, in a reptilian Republican reality, what's really going to happen is they teach through repetition. Reptilians repetition. That's why they do rituals. This is all rated R stuff, by the way. That's why all this stuff begins with R. Okay.
Reptilian Republic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just the whole repetitive cycle. But there's a mastery in this cycle. Make no mistake. Meaning that you have beings that are like Smeagol with the earth. They just as soon as hold on to this in fear of what goes on next. And let me explain why, because this is not, because a lot of people always say, they say, oh yeah, the higher beings can't get to the next level and they're scared of it, blah, blah, blah. You damn right. Let me explain to you what really happens. It's a frequency. So if you actually make yourself what looks like a knight on another realm, it's a gray aura. And it actually builds up around the person like a shell. So this is the kind of guy that'd be like, yo, man, dance, laugh or something. He'd just be sitting there. And if you looked at his aura, it's all gray. So that gray-like, ghost-like aura has a problem when trying to move through energetic fields because it starts to crack. And then because what's under that layer is so nubile, so fresh, and so not even been around outside of the box in so long, it's hazardous for it to be out into a real reality that is the real truth about things. Right. And so this is at times what many of us do with ourselves. We build up all these layers and shells and shields and swords and serpents and all sorts of stuff just all over the place for what? They say, oh, it's for protection. That's why they put the serpent on the same. What is it for? What's protection? I sense fear. What are you protecting yourself from? The dweller. Oh, no wonder why. Somebody didn't get the memo to you guys. You guys created the dweller too. There's no part of this that we didn't. And this is the other thing. I'm glad we started talking about this because I have to tell everyone who they really is. Because the they thing was gone way too far. Because they is getting way too much power. They is you. And let me explain how. This is from what we agreed upon on the Mount of Hermon, when the 33rd fell and gave you the degrees in your back, we agreed that there would be a collective projection here and that we would all use our powers and ability to do this damn thing. And that's exactly some of the terminology that was used.
What the hell were we thinking?
Well, Semyaza was doing all the thinking. Meaning that one of the more perfect angels was doing all of the thinking when it conceived that it would create a perfect physical reality and outdo Father. This is the standard competition. Like in the beginning, it was only a competition between Son and Father. That competition still exists within the Bible, whether people know it or not. So, right. But that whole competitive thing, that begets the judgments. Because what is always at the end of any competition? The winner. Right. As they say, second place is the first loser. The reality is that any kind of red and blue competition gets judgment going on because someone's got to win. And so this is just, again, a part of that whole thing. But they is all of us, because in a collective projection, see, this is what happens. If I only can create daisies, then I get a little bored of seeing these daisies. And if you can create oak trees, then maybe we need to talk. So then we can have a reality of daisies and oak trees. And then so what we'll do is we'll come together in union. That's what harmony is. It's sexual or sexual. Two triangles will come together, and then they will birth from the center something, a blend of both of them. And so what they is billions, they can't even be counted, of decisions that are made at every single moment that are all mating and spawning with each other to make an outcome. So oftentimes this will create an outcome that you do not want, because there's always an outcome that you do want and always an outcome that you don't want, because you're still in duality. So you see, this is how the wheel gets kicking. And what I've done is, and me and a good friend of mine, Jason, we've begun to record at least the 7 or 8 phases, or 7, 8, 9 phases of judgment, meaning stuff that you haven't even seen. When you look at judgment backwards, like I said, instead of thinking about you judging other people, the main thing you need to be looking at is, have you been judging yourself non-worthy? Because once you do that, then you get caught in this frequency. Now, let me explain a little bit about these frequencies. In the frequencies, the deeper frequencies of duality correspond to the animals. No matter how cute and cuddly and snuggly you think this thing may be, before we domesticate it, it will rip your head off. And that's just how it works. That's all a part of the ecosystem. So what the netters were doing, which the netters are the forces of nature now, because netter and nature are the same word, even when crossed over from each tradition. But what you'll see is that the netters were utilizing different vessels to experience consciousness in the dualistic reality. The netters were the first gods. Nature is the first god. That is the elementals. So those are the forces in which things began from, and then all the trickles down come later. So the dog is a very key component to this current stage of evolution, as they call it, basically more gradual progress into duality. Hey, we've gotten far now. How far we got to go? I don't know. I can't see. It's too dark. But we definitely can keep a light bearer around that'll actually keep lighting all this stuff up until we figure out how we're going to light up all the space again. How long is that going to take? Look how much progress we've made. You look in the sky at night and see how much progress has been made about lighting up the darkness. So the reality is that, you know, I get a little excited about this, by the way, but the reality is that the dog body, who is Cain, who is a canine, who is from Canaan, was used as a portal. This portal is known as the black dog, but she's a bitch, meaning that it's actually not a male. If anything, it's a male-female. That's why the Baphomet is hermaphroditic. But all the rest of the symbolism is way too encrypted for people to see that that's Venus in the other stage of its consciousness as an initiator into the dark mysteries, which basically look like a vagina. You see, the initiation to the dark mysteries is not all of what they keep writing about with their fanciful tales in these books. It's about plunging into wombs and then replicating yourself into realities and then experiencing it like an adventure because you're lost and don't know where you're going. Meaning that the craziest act could be to drive in to an actual womb reality and then reincarnate yourself there and then start to try to figure out what's going on. And we've done that. We've plunged headlong into this reality in order to experience what? And we talked about this earlier, duality. Because there's only one other place when you leave totality. And so, you know, that I believe can give us the first half. We can take us a moment. And then when we come forward, as I always say, you know, just to keep it somewhat correct, then we'll get into, you know, we'll get a little bit more about the dog tags, even why the U.S. military has them wearing dog tags. You got to think about that. And, you know, we'll get into a little bit more of the depth of the cymatics and those kind of things that actually create the reality, or what we're calling reality. I always say there's reality and actuality. And of course, unless you have something you want to address now.
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I just want to make a comment about being your own father. I had a full-blown vision of being just that. I embodied my father. Yeah. It was bizarre. It was one of those full-blown waking conscious visions too. So I just found that coincidental. One other thing I want to touch on out of this first hour before we go into a break here is going back to that pyramid metaphor that you brought up of the 0, the 2, and the 1 being at the top. Now, my question there, and you said that the meaning of life, the goal is to get out of this reality. Now, my question there is it getting out of the reality of the duality, or is it mastering the duality?
Well, obviously, it's like the chicken or the egg in the tense to that question, because, you know, as one experiences the duality, they move their cells back up into union. So if you can see, because this pyramid is in, the complete thing is inside the body, and then the top point or the exit point is really the top of the consciousness. It's like right when you're about to, come out of that thing entirely. But as you seed into the body, you spread things into two. But if you notice, even there's a central part of the brain. There's the corpus callosum, which is basically responsible for communicating with the left brain and the right brain. So and having the left brain and the right brain communicate with one another. So this symbolism, it is very replete in itself. And when we just look at it just for what it is, at the top, and this is why, if you take a symbol like this and you say it's the Illuminati, and then it gets all crazy, because that's why there's a sun on the top, because that's what the metaphor means. The sun is the soul. So that means one. So we're able to denote just even by that one point. People need to see the symbol just for the common sense in it. Just at that one point, we're now at the soul. We're at basically the being of ourselves that is collected, and where we've come out of. And this is why the other 2 points are always where? They're at the bottom. Right? One on the left and one on the right. They've been able to accomplish, as they keep going out of duality more and more, they get further and further apart. You see, the symbolism is telling tons of things, because if you come from that central point and then spread into duality in physical worlds from there, and then you basically, you know mathematically that you were your father as you come into the dimension, because one begets another, and that's not even a part of any kind of mystery or whatever mythology. Right. It's a fact. Right. It would have to be a fact. But remember, when you can get deeper into the symbolism, you see that the king was Cain. It means it's Quaheen, which was the cognate for a queen, like a king queen. To prove, just as you see on most alchemical charts, that they say the first being that came on the planet was basically an androgyny. And it had that ability to reproduce from itself. And that was basically so if you're seeing what's really being said, and this is how you know it's a fact. So king, the word king is the word Cain. Okay? So from that point, you're seeing that Cain was the first child that was born from God. Okay? So let's just look at it as a metaphor. What they're saying is the totality, the sun, the soul, the supreme being, split itself, and the first thing that came split itself from just being that central consciousness. You can't even say it was a male female inside of the same body. And this is why I was saying you get 0, 1, 2, and then you even X out the 3. There's no such thing, because in the totality, and this becomes, just a further elaboration, there is no gender at all. So you can't even say that it's a male female and that's totality. No, the next being, the one that's called, let me see, I guess that would be called 0, okay, is an androgyny. You see? And so this is how, it's like numbers will reveal it if we're willing to rework the numbers. And, I had someone, and I don't even tell the story, but basically someone who went really far in the mathematics, to a point where, because of how much they were known, they had to approach the Society of Physics of the U.S., and to go in and to show them these numbers that they had been getting wrong. And the person couldn't understand, if everyone had progressed so far along in math, why couldn't they see this simple equation? They sent this man out of the room, sent spies after this man, and this man they watch from till today to make sure the man doesn't tell people in the arena of physics what he really discovered about how our numbers are wrong. And we don't have to get into the big fat Einstein equations, more so than just seeing that the 0 in the identity of it, the 1 in the identity of it, and the 2 has been interchanged and messed all up. And so just that kind of change in our framework, since we're already in this dualistic thing, then it changes everything. It turns everything backwards. Like I was saying with even the word backwards, that it would make our words backwards. It would make our brains turn in the opposite direction. It would basically wreak havoc on our consciousness, even if we were making some type of progress. And this is why the English language has been directly connected, especially from the people who brought it forth. They were connecting it to phi. So that was the whole purpose of the language. So it shows that the language was constructed off of a theory of infinite division, because that's, of course, the anomaly with phi, that it just keeps spitting out more and more numbers, and nothing does that. So if you see this, and this is another thing, especially for code heads, if you see phi then as a self-replicating seed germ, this means I drop this from the sky, mainly like a diamond, a pyramid, with phi encrypted inside of it. It slams down from the velocity of what it's catching from the atmosphere. It slams itself down deep into the core of the earth, thus throwing it off 23.5 degrees. Then division begins. There's 5 sides on a 4-sided pyramid. There's the point and the 5 sides, the four points on the side. And there goes the beginning of division. You see, because all the mathematics that were learned from that point even were encoded within that pyramid, and also mainly the ones that were in Upper Egypt, Nubia. So you see how even just one of those, again, dropping around to people that may not even know what's going on, it's projecting in itself duality in a sense of saying, hey, you need to divide more and you need to discover more. And I'm not, again, so when you get out of duality, you don't keep saying, oh, this is bad, and oh my goodness, I can't believe, oh, this is wrong. And you get out of all of that, or you would have never got this far. The reality is, like, even when they drop an obelisk, like they drop some of the obelisks from Egypt all the way in Washington, D.C. Why? Because those obelisks were there being worshiped, consecrated, and prayed to during a certain time where the frequency that was all pervading is that everyone was actually under the rulership of one being that was really more competent than somebody like Obama or Bush of running an entire nation into a level of being able to expand themselves. You see what I mean? So, right. But still that whole frequency of dominion, which no one has right. You see, because even a person may, oh, well, yeah, that's right, baby. The pharaohs, and yeah, he's getting into it. And then, no, I'm not saying that anything was good or bad. Because if you look at really what the act was, it shows in the Old Testament that the people don't have a king. So they keep asking for a king and asking for king. And these are all metaphors. This is who are they asking? They're asking this God. They're the children of Abel. So they're asking the same being that they've always been trying to communicate with, that they want this king. And then the being comes back, which is themselves, and says, you don't need a king. I'm telling you, you don't need one. And these people, oh, yes, you're going to give us one. They said, so they elected Saul. This is another riddle. Saul it means salt. In almost all languages, it's synonymous even with the serpent. But Sol is the planet Saturn, because Saturn has the same shape geometrically as the cube of salt. And I said, oh, you shall be the salt of the earth. And so when they elected Saul, to see what all the metaphors keep playing themselves out, there's no deviation. That's why so many people are attracted to it, but they're attracted to the externalized version of it, right? They don't want to see how this is all going on inside. And then so as the story is playing out, as they elect the king has bad practices. Like everything about Saul was just wrong. And then it progresses from there. Next thing they get David, DVD. This is another metaphor for divide. Basically, the one that came with the sword. They said that his hands were too bloody. He never received the edict from the king. They had to pass it down to Solomon because David had been involved in too much war. With what? The sword. You see, and so then so you're following the entire thing as a metaphor rather than the actual story of physical people, although I'm sure the shadows do cast themselves and people animate those shadows. And then, of course, Solomon comes along. And then so you're reading a story down a timeline. And then what it's really showing, though, is that there's nothing new under the sun. That right. There is in the circle, there's a pattern to it. And that once you get that pattern, which was basically probably what the Essenes were looking for. They're like, shoot, we're going to get out of here. We watch the stars every night because once we get this pattern down and then we understand the actual emission coming from these stars, and then we map the stars to these animals, and then we understand the animalistic traits that we need to move around in the parallax of our own consciousness, then we'll be stargates in no time. And then we'll make it back to the continuum. Anyone refuting that? No, we're not in division. Okay, let's go. You see, so it's that simple. It's like, when are you tired of being banged up in the Matrix, basically? Are you fighting for the Matrix? And that's, it was a real thing on the movie where they said some of the people so hopelessly attached to the Matrix that they will fight you over this Matrix because there's always, okay, yeah, everything but, like I said, the ring that my wife gave me, that's... Got to go with me. You got to bury that with me. And, I watched the documentary Earth is from the Earthing map, but I think it's called Grounded. And, it was just so deep, man. And just how the guy's been doing so much work, and he's got, really he projected it really well because he's been in film for 30 years, and then also he's passionate about teaching people how to ground themselves and understanding how important that is. But, through that process of the film, there was one point where it really highlighted in a very deep way, and none of this will be going with you, like no matter who you are, how much rank you have and all of that kind of stuff, like you'll basically be building all that up to at one point let it go anyway, because even if you do come back here again, the probability of you having access to that means that you would actually have to be a sequential. Then you're really in deep doo-doo. I mean, you actually have to be a person that understands how to reincarnate themselves back into a life again, into the same family life again. Hope that that family life respected you enough to preserve everything that you had until you got back. Meaning that you probably would have to be threatening them. Some people don't even play it all out. If someone's on the physical reality, like the Queen of England, who is definitely a sequential, meaning he keeps coming back over and over and over again, it's through fear, through those dukes, which are basically the knights, other entities, disembodied, disincarnate, vowed and vowed entities, basically, that will protect that kind of domain. But think about what they've gotten themselves into. And as my good friend Jason told me, he said, look, Sevan, you should see them. They're more lost in this than anyone else. Some people think that they're the Queen of England. He's buying into that role so deep that they never get out the matrix. Queen may be the last person to shut the door to fully realize that, the matrix needs to be canceled. You see what it means? It may go on just because one being is continuously projecting duality, because that's all it takes. It's just about whether we want to join into that. So this next level for us all is about a great stage of maturity where it's just other things to do. And that's one thing once people can also look at it. They don't want to, just accept that they need to stop judging things. They can also look at how much can you really change anyway about this stuff that we're talking about. Like if we take it piece by piece, and if you say Illuminati, like there's how many of these guys? And then we're going to change all their minds?
Right.
Come on.
Exactly.
I'm not going off on that fool's errand. That's like you telling me to run into Fort Knox with a BB gun. It doesn't make sense to me, at least anymore. So the reality is that this is about getting very mature with this and saying, you know what? I can actually spend my time and, of course, my energy, and I'm responsible for maintaining this frequency on something that is far more productive and far more balanced. So that way I maintain that balance. And then anything that I create and I build, it projects that balance versus me being all pissed off. And then I'm writing a blog, right, that day. And then all the anger, which I may not even express directly in that blog, but I'm expressing it energetically, and it's reeking from everything that I'm saying. You see what I mean? And so this is also how this collective projection of the illusion, we can throw webs onto each other and start trapping each other. They call it crabs in a bucket, right? So it's a real thing that until people understand the principles of actually judging themselves, in many tenses, your test of whether you've gotten out of judging will be simply the stuff that they're carrying on about you, and you just staying out of it, from that dynamic, if you really think about it. So.
Right.
And, of course, I'm talking about stuff that I'm working on. Like some people say, well, I saw your post like 3 months ago. You tore this guy's head off. And I was like, I'm working on that.
Yeah. Definitely work in progress.
For sure.
All right, man. So let's take a break, and we'll come back and continue on with this stuff. This is some good stuff, Sevan. And I just love having you on.
Oh, man, likewise. Like I was telling them.
You get me, you invigorate me back into this stuff when if every time that I feel like I hit one of those flat spots in my own personal growth, I'll just flip on some Sevan, and that'll get me going.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm here for, man. Like it's likewise too.
Good stuff, man. All right, guys out there listening, websites are resistance2010.com, astralquest.com, secretenergy.com, and you are listening to this on the 100thmonkeyrradio.com with Tom minus Ramon tonight. And I would urge you guys to pop on over to our website also and check it out. We've got hundreds and hundreds of hours and hundreds of guests on there. So going into our 5th season here, Sevan, we've
veterans.
Good stuff. All right, guys, we will see you in the second hour. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. And for Mr. Ramon, the love you deny is the pain you carry. Namaste, my friends. Here on the 100th Monkey Radio, Tom without Ramon tonight. He is experiencing some Well, it's probably feeling better by now, but he gave me a call earlier and said he had a bit of a toothache. So, best wishes to you out there, Ramon.
For
Love
sure.
you, bud. Uh, I want to thank everybody out there so much as Ramon does. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Much gratitude for all of you guys that are out there listening and are on the path and supporting the Hundreds Monkey Radio and all these other amazing people out there that are sharing their truths, sharing what they've learned and what they've experienced in this thing we call life, and helping everybody out there else to grow in their own way. So, anyways, we've got Sevan with us tonight, and Sevan. One more question out of the first hour, and then I'm sure this will lead off into some other stuff, but a little bit about frequency. And we were talking about looking at a dead tree with the third eye, with the single eye, and really not being able to see it come into life until you look at it with that single eye. And then it just amazing things happen out of that dead tree. The frequency within that changes. You start reading or seeing the frequency, and then time is mixed into this also. But I guess the question I have out of this, it just seems to me like, or it appeared to me that this is exactly the same thing that all of these amazing healers that are out there are doing, is that they're looking at something that, say you've got somebody that's got a physical ailment, and what they to cure or repair or make whole that ailment, they'll use that single eye to envision it whole, which is actually projecting a different frequency upon it. Am I on spot here?
For sure. I mean, I can get a little bit deeper into, how that, how that really works, especially with the tree, because, or, just with anything as you're moving through frequencies, because just for people to understand what happens when your centers are coming on is that the chakra centers are actually powering themselves up, and they form a point in front of you when they connect together. It's like all the colors, if they go out far enough, or inward enough, that's actually the correct direction, then they actually coalesce like Russian dolls into a certain point. And then at that point, all your eyes, because you still have more than the two eyes in your head, they become one. And then you're able to, and then while that's going on, you also hear this ringing in your ear. And it's a frequency, and you hear it going up higher, 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 just like a frequency machine. It's so amazing how the frequency is frequency. When you hear the tone of yourself going up in your ear. And then as you're watching everything starts to come alive, like nature. And you basically begin to see everything that is moving, which is basically everything. But we went very far into these studies and into these experiences. And we realized that part of this is because when we get into duality, when we get into fear, we become paralyzed. We basically are in a stone world after that. And things that generally are moving become static according to how we're seeing them, because what you're seeing is the divided version of what you believe it is. So even as you see it as a tree, that's not what it really is. On a major level, it's vast, because it also has a higher self just like you do, per se. And we all have that same higher self. That's what higher self means. And it's alive there and still functioning. The thing is this is a very interesting thing that we do. We jump and catch, meaning that we send ourselves into lower frequencies to then reach ourselves again and birth a new one that knows all the steps of how to get there. And then that one then does the same thing. And, it's just as strange as the whole bit. Some people say, that's strange. Like, why would you? Don't even ask me. I'm telling you it's going on because I can see it. But why it's going on, that's the wilderness. That's the what, when, why, where, how, the W's, the zigzag, the waves. That's That's getting into that whole thing and experiencing these multiplicit realities, right? And so that's why also the name of the Supreme Being, as I always mention during these shows, is meant unmovable in the ancient language, meaning it wasn't a wave. It wasn't a zigzag, because even though I said earlier that it's like we're in a stone world, even rocks move. They just move slow. And if you don't think so, go watch a mountain for 1 billion years. It'll change shape. So everything is always moving, but based on its wave, based on its oscillation. So if we move into a higher oscillation, which I have and individuals I know have, the earth comes alive. It's like an adventure. And I've been telling people about this for 5 years. Of just basically, if anything's gotten better, it's my way of explaining to people the same thing that I've been talking about. But it's just about people are also they've been hurt, Tom. So what happens is they don't trust very well. It's like the beautiful animal, right? And it's got no fangs, no poison. So this thing is constantly on the lookout for some kind of predator. You see, so even a person's spirit, and this is what, I wanted to talk about, is that we need to understand that the reason why there's so much, urgency around this is because you can also do damage to your soul force here. Don't damage your soul for these beings. I'm just saying that directly, meaning that still remember, on the real scope of things, this is about your soul. And there's so many different levels of the incarnation, levels on these physical planes, and so many lessons that you can actually have to go through and learn before you realize that all is self. Man, don't scar yourself up. Woman, don't scar yourself up that way in this matrix, because it's got some other stuff down there that's still grinding, that's not aware of itself even more because of how deep it's on the grind. And on top of that, we to have a tendency to have to dive into those kind of places at some point and still pull those individuals out if we're talking about all, and we're all going to do it. So all the work will get done. It'll just be those who are equipped for doing the work. But again, make no mistake, like there's a lot of different things that are going on here on this plane. So if you find yourself just in a position to be able to listen to the radio show, get on your internet, man, somebody's giving you a great gift, because you don't have the real oppressor, the one that's made of fire, breathing down your neck every single moment, dropping bombs and all sorts of weird stuff that's going on in your terror-based reality as you spiral down a vortex. Because if anybody, think about what we're talking about, and this is again maturity. If anyone's experiencing that, you trying to come with them about how they need to change their diet and maybe eat a few more goji berries doesn't compute, because it's actually based on now the person's level of necessity of what they have to deal with. You see, so that's why what you're looking at also is, remember, some have climbed really high to that top of the pyramid, but still haven't went through the door. You see? And that's, of course, that's why they put the capstone. They they show it all there. They even, to make sure you don't even get into the area of the top, they didn't took the top, put a rocket on the bottom, and flew it up in the air a little bit, right? It's like, where's the top? We can't get there? Oh, no, there's the space elevator is broke. And this is how it comes out in the reality, in the physical. Oh, the space elevator is broke. No, there's not a way yet. Sorry, that humans can go from the surface all the way to the sun, and no. But that's what they're saying is that, in your consciousness, there is a disconnection, especially within the communication center, of you being able to enter into the middle pillar of yourself, which is known as the Jed, go all the way up, and then completely come out of the temple, through the holiest of holies, which is the pituitary gland, and out the temple, into the clouds, all the way past the firmament, blow past every single archon who's looking at you all crazy as if they're judges on the threshold and they want to judge you. See, think about what happens as you're coming. If some people have the ability to even project themselves within a collective projection, which I was talking about before, when one of us left, we all could go down that same path. That's what I felt like when I even came back 7 years ago after the massive vibration. I felt like I pierced a hole beyond this veil. I just didn't know what all that meant until now. And that hole, that path, is still open and will always be open and can always be traveled down. And it's a path straight to the source. You see, there's no evangels, no Mashiachas, no gurus, no nobody that's really necessary to go in. Everything that's necessary will be brought about sequentially. And then this is the other thing I want to tell people, how this was created, because we're holding a frequency. When we put this collective vision together, which we've already done, there's thousands of us now. It makes a stream. I'm telling you, none of this stuff is even different than what they're creating in the digital world. It's the same thing. They plagiarized it, if anything, at best. But a stream is when a collective conscious group of people start imagining what they would really like, using their imagination of what they would really like things to be like. Now, guess what? If they don't know how to get there, it doesn't mean that those spaces can't be already inhabited. So sometimes I go to those spaces. There's like nobody there. I remember I went to one, like it was about 4 or 5 months ago. I was like, man, how many people's in this world? And they said 4 or 5 of us. And the world was huge. And I say, because the frequency is so high here, it's very difficult for the beings from where you're at to even get here. Why? It's all simple. In this reality, we can get possessed by ourselves. We can get possessed by our own demons. So this gets into a little bit of the depth of this thing. What happens is that when you begin to engage in certain practices, you leave a signature, just as sure as you playing a videotape of an actor that's acting his ass off, but he's dead now. You're seeing him just like he was. But that's what you see also in the astral plane. In spaces that certain things have been done that have left a strong signature or a spike. I need to make a note here. When it leaves a large signature or a spike, that's when oh man, Tom, bring it back to me one time of just what I was talking about, because I had to make this note because I can't forget to tell everyone about the panorama. But go ahead.
Oh God.
Oh my goodness! Now I got you too. Okay, well, so we'll just start on something else. But we were talking about the projection and the collective stream and how we're just going.
You went into that realm with just 4 people, the world with 4 people.
Okay, yeah, and we have blown past that though. We were still a little bit further past that, but we got into a little bit about how the frequencies from the people that are here. Okay, so being possessed by yourself.
You're talking about the pathway that's the door that's open. It's there.
Exactly. What I'm saying is how a person can be possessed by themselves. And this is what happens when in a physical reality and there becomes so much desire in the desire body, meaning things that need to be fulfilled, actions, lots of passions. These are spikes in the frequency. What happens is, and I'll get into this, and it's basically I call it the panorama. Okay, and what the panorama is that it's the same. It's also very synonymous with the pantheism, but in this case, you're the God. So what the pantheism is the God in all stages, meaning all the movements of the sun in the sky, even when it's below the equator, meaning it's traversing through the underworld. Okay, so those different stages are known as the degrees. Okay, so. In what happens when we leave the body, which like if a person dies, let's say, they see this panorama of all the things that they've done in their life. It looks just like one of those pictures that you take with the cell phone, and they got a new feature. You could just panorama. You hit start and you move the cell phone over and over and over and over and over to the left or the right, and then you stop. And then when they process the picture, it's a big, huge picture, and it shows you the whole thing. So that's how life is, except the points that you really see the most, they have spikes in them. It's very similar to seeing a record and knowing where to start the song. And the old fogies know about that. You look at the record, you see there's a certain kind of line, and that's where the song starts. So that's how our panoramic lifeline looks when we leave the body and we're looking back down that chord of the frequency that we've been making during our progression through this portal. And so what happens is that now those points, which in many cases there are times maybe something happened basically that spiked your frequency. So it could be very drastic things, very fearful things, very exciting things, anything in those ranges. So what the adept really works towards is to actually experience their life not in these spikes. It doesn't mean that you're dull. It just means that you overall react Because it's not like, so, okay, what it is that what you're experiencing doesn't change your frequency. It's very easy. So you can be on a very high balanced frequency, okay, and achieve this and still be enjoying being on a high balanced frequency. Because some people think when I talk about, not moving and all this kind of stuff, that I'm talking about death. Quite the contrary. What I'm attempting to explain to people here is if the lower worlds, and now I'm latching on to what I was talking about earlier, if the lower worlds are full of more confusion and more chaos and nobody even knows where they are, then please somebody turn this 180 degrees and tell me what the higher world would consist of. Opposite. So that means that there's no being lost. There's no spiraling down. So you see, it's just being able to reverse engineer. And this becomes one of the most key components that you still need from the logical side of your brain while you may be, getting waguru somewhere. It's, having that logical side of you that's able to get the framework right here. Because this is the other thing. Man, even on the physical planes, the story of how we go into the higher frequency, because that's the direction we're headed in, so that we're leaving some kind of wake, can get a little bit more interesting, meaning we're going there. So let's make the story great. So that way, when we get to where we're going, and we surely will, then what will be detailed there will be written in the stars for the people that still remain in duality to be affected by, because that's what we're still being affected by, is the energy of the star. It pierces through porous objects. And it will send the next wave of this world as it's correcting its tilt. You see what I mean? So this is what we're talking about. And this is not a save the world campaign. It's very important for people to understand, to not load that program to save the world. Save yourself. In that, you've saved the world already. Trust me, if you ever get to a point where you've reached balance, you'll know what to do. But until then, just focus on that. As far as focusing on everyone else, that generally means judging everyone else. And that's what you say, well, you go in a chat room and there's always bickering and fighting. They're going to fight and bite each other all up because there's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. Many of the people are trapped inside of their own consciousness and waiting to receive the great news. And so that's why this is nothing. We're 6 years in, we're still barely making it to being where Michael Tsarian is as far as people knowing about us. And this is not the first or second year. This is 6 years of, at least I felt that way. Each conversation, and other people exclaim the same thing, except for maybe a few off days out of hundreds of conversations, were always packed with the knowledge of the procession of how we got to this point. So this is not just something that someone immediately comes and talks about at all. It has to go through deep contemplation and deep levels of experience in order to be able to authenticate this is exactly what's going on. But back to the chase, the possession of the self is basically when you basically live in these crazy lavish realities where there's too much spikes going on, and to the point where you develop what's called a sin body, and it's basically a moon body, because sin is the name for moon. So basically all the things that you really deal with in that frequency range, and all the things you may conduct yourself in doing, gets hardened into an actual substance that other particles begin to collect around. So this is the origins of what people call spirits, seeing the difference between spirits and souls. Spirits are basically large energetic signatures that cosmic dust have began to attract to and accumulate on in order to create something sentient. You follow me? Because
Right.
Even if you look at what a human being is, we kind of got that story. We're like these ships moving really slow. A lot of stuff is accumulated on us, mainly ether, because ether to light is like a snail. Okay, ether is actually very slow. It's like a gas, even though ether is like fast to us because we're flesh now. Ether has accumulated on the idea of us, but basically the soul's projection and shadow of who we are, you see, has attracted other things in order to be able to get to a level to accumulate a level of sentience. Basically, a large walking microbe, in a certain sense, is what this level of sentience is. And the reason is because some people say, well, that sounds like some kind of globular monster or something. What are you talking about? Well, according to the frequency, that's basically what it is. Because the other frequencies that are moving at warp speed, like the geometry starts tightening up. Like everyone basically gets a workout, and everyone's got halves up there. That was serious. It's like high spin. You're burning off all excesses. And so that's why there's no, oh, let's take this one. Let's take, man, you better leave that there. We don't buy anything that's big because we're subject to get up out of here, leaving all that stuff behind. We're not leaving no signatures. There'll be no trails. There's nothing really for me to anchor myself to there. And that's really when you're ready to, it's like when the captain comes in the ship and says, okay, everybody, we're about to take this one out of here. That's your right and left, meaning that that's something that as a sovereign on your ship, not with pirates on your ship, because that's why they use the symbol of pirates, because if they get on board with that black flag making you believe that there's a death, now you got mutiny on board and you subject to walk the plank, be lost in the abyss without your ship, dealing with Chthon, which is basically some large cephalopods that have even gotten themselves deeper into trouble. Yo, how long have y'all been here? Like, people need to understand what we're really talking about here with demerge and all these kind of things. They act like these are the homies, man. Come on, like, what are you even talking about? Like, let's aspire for greater things. And that's why, this is the genesis of mental, physical, and spiritual expansion is what we're really getting into here. And, and this stuff it's like I said, it's moving at light speed. I suggest people don't get in the way. It may shing through things. You just hear that shing. Like, yo, what happened to him? He got in the way of light speed. Ooh, I guess he'll be all right later on. But serious, it's like, we see the message. It's very clear to us. If it's this clear, we make a run for it now. You see, like some people are like, well, yes, and philosophize more. Oh, no. Actually, you need to be at a meeting tonight after lockdown. Because, if you can see it getting to this level, someone has to open up the envelope. Like, why would I sit here and watch these people suffer? We're talking about a spiritual thing. You see what I mean? It's like, if you can open up the way, by all means, make no delay. And what we've uncovered, again, has shown beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is something more massive that we can achieve. This is not something to see. The issue with the church is it's so fictitious. See, people don't get it. Like, even if I was going to subscribe to your Jesus thing and I was going to subscribe to all that, I subscribed to it before. But what made me click the unsubscribe button is it's so fictitious that you start getting this idea that maybe spirituality is not real unless you were striving to be something like a prophet. Okay, not even a pastor, but a prophet. Because if you were genuinely doing something like that, you would have been led down the path of Ezekiel. And then you would eventually made your way to Enoch. And then you would have eventually seen that the reason why these men were in touch with, or if this is a metaphor, were in touch with something, is because they knew certain words. It's just as simple as that. People, they blow right by it, but they don't understand words or worlds. These men had words that would catch you up like a chariot. They used to ride on the back of this word. They were saying, well, what is this? It's basically a composite of the nature forces formed in a way in which it becomes your vehicle. They call that a body. You see, but the body then of these kind of beings was further projected as far as what kind of vehicle we ride in. This is like you go with somebody and they get on the Toyota lot and they're trying to buy a 1989 Taurus and there's a Bugatti across the street and they got the money in their pocket. That's really what it's like. The person has the ability to excel themselves beyond the sphere. They're just waiting to get the message in a certain way. So remember what I'm talking about here. If I can explain to you still pretty much everything that's going on here and do that in English language, that means that English language contains enough for all of the riddles of how to get out of Wonderland, Alice, or how to get out of the maze, Minotaur, will actually reveal itself through a sequence of the letters. I just needed to understand what that sequence is. This is what I tell people to do. Instead of, looking at it and trying to pull the letters apart and things, if you back off of it and just realize you have all of the tools, you have A to Z. That's one cable, one cabal, one ring. That's all you need is that one ring. Through that one ring, you can bind them. Now, we're not talking about other humans. See, that's what they do on the Lord of the Ring. They try to bind orcs and all this weird stuff. They love to make it external, but it's all internal. When you become the Lord of the Ring, or the Lord that has the complete language or cabal flowing in their mind to the point where all of it turns on each other, we can start somewhere simple and end up somewhere great. We can take one letter, we can take one number, we can take one metaphor, we can take an insect, we can take anything and lead you back to the great arcanum step by step. That's when you have the cabal. Now, the cabal, of course, is the black cube. It's called the Kaaba, and they say it's stained because of the sins of the world. Okay, minus the theatrics, what are you telling me? What's being said is that the Ka, the spirit, the Ba, the soul, in their co-injunction with one another, that's why they're circumambulating it, formed a seed germ, and that seed germ is growing up from the base, meaning black coal carbon, 666, a diamond, a demon, a daemon. You see, that's how it starts. And so you watch the metaphor completely as the being is in the crucible and then comes out from the cross 1,000 times stronger, raises itself. You see what I mean? Like, then what is it like for a child to raise themselves? You see, these are the metaphors that I'm talking about matching it up with. You raise yourself. You've been through the crucible. Even have one game is called Destiny right now. Most of the time is spent in the crucible fighting. This is what people are doing on the cross, on earth. What did they look at the symbol of earth? It's a cross. That's the symbol all the way around. What does it mean? They used to call it the spoke of the wheel. Right. And they used to show the being mangled in the wheel. and this was because it will roll over you, millstone or grain. That's what they used to say. Like, you need to choose very fast, or you would just logically become the other one, or systematically become the other one. And that's why I was saying with the grinder, you got the people in the lower parts of the country, the areas that always handle the lower parts of our body. See, look at the earth as one larger body, and then look at many of the southern countries, especially those going through turmoil. You can't line it up as a straight body. You have to line it up as a globe. So you wrap the body around it as you perceive the body. And then when you notice the areas that handle the lower part of your body, the bowels, etc., it's real shitty. And no right. pun intended. Right. And the reason is because the whole corpus is not handling its waste properly. See, with a human being, every single part, as it perfects itself, all of its excrements end up becoming a seed germ. So, and then ending with the most vital seed germ of all, which is the male semen. So even the saliva, the urine, all these in the perfected being actually become some type of elixir. So, this is, just to keep going, I'll keep driving through this. So, what I'm saying is that, we're at the cusp, baby. Like, it's, we got it all here now, and it's just connecting with everybody. And so, I take a moment, just to come, into a bit more balanced frequency and just, talk a little bit about secret energy and really what it's about. We plan to really get launched in January, and it's from what I perceive, the world's first open source spiritual platform. And we've been able to really bring a lot of people together, especially for the last 6 years, and seeing what exactly has been working and what's not working. And the reality is we definitely need to agree on something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a 9-stage curriculum system that corresponds to basically the 7 colors on the spectrum, which you can see when you shine a light into a prism, and then the 2 other colors, which constantly remain hidden, which are white and black, and that makes 9 colors. And that takes a person through the entire stage of their progression from the netherworld, which is the best place to start, because you definitely don't want to build a palace on a moat or a palace on top of some sand. So we start there. I'm there. A lot of the teachings are really centered around a person understanding how to cycle their energy, not just staying up in the air all day with whoever's up there. Metatron, I guess, was hanging out there, him and Rail. But basically hanging out in space and not realizing exactly how you can progress on this physical plane furthering your soul, because the building never stops. So I'll get also into this building that has been built with no hands. See, there's a secret about that, if you were really to get into the sacred space, then man's hand has never touched that area before, never built anything there. And this has always become an anomaly, especially for craftsmen and masons, because they were attempting to build a perfect temple under the constraints of Hiram Abiff. So what's really meant within this metaphor is that inside of an individual, they are constructing this temple, and that temple is being built free of man's hands, because there's no actual pentagrams touching inside. And this is, to make this clear, your hands are the 5 points of the pentagram. And so we build, that's why the pentagram is associated with Thor's hammer. The hammer is also associated with your hand, because your hand is needed to have that hammer, and the hammer is associated with building. So man became synonymous, man and woman. When I say man, I mean all beings made of ma, which is flesh. So that hammer meant having this kind of hand. That's why this hand is very, very, is the key to everything. That's why they keep saying, well, the hand, mainly the opposable thumb, is the key to all of what human beings are able to accomplish. Yeah, because he can hold a weapon. Like a human being, if not utilized properly, is one of the most dangerous weapons ever. That's why you would have to put it inside of a bubble. People need to think about it like, I guess, forget thinking about it. As you progress through the energetic levels, you'll see what I'm talking about. The energy of the human being becomes so high, if somehow that energy was out of control, we would have even more problems than what we have right now. And then to the chagrin of all these other individuals who say they have some magical power and all this stuff, it probably will push out 2 millivolts best. Meaning some kind of phenomena that is incorporated with phantoms. This is how it works. Think about the lower frequencies like lower end currencies. Okay, you come with a British sterling, you could buy up the town. So that's how it is with those energies. So if a person could be on a very low energy and then even broker a contract, because that's really what it is, breaking, broker a contract with other even lower life forms to accomplish certain things, but still be able to broker that deal in their energetic level because they're buying in on lower stock. You see what I mean? That's all of how it works. And you don't even find too many people that are able to accomplish that, because still within the human psyche, we have a fear of our predecessor, the daemon. And this is the other thing people are not thinking about. I was just explaining to people how the physical body went through this genetic process. Even all the way past the reptilian, it's been trudging through that and fighting all of those different stages of consciousness and breaking through them. So it's very strong. After it left reptilian, it went to daemon next. That's what all these ancient books say. And the daemon was large, like it was like a rock man. And then after that stage, rock man they basically said this being was mostly mineral. And there's a consciousness behind minerals because there's a frequency in minerals, right? And so they used to call these or when we were in that stage, the nobles, because we also had a great deal of integrity. You see what I mean? Like we were really unmovable, shining, crystalline, these kind of things, you see? So we watched the whole progress, and in each stage, and this is what's interesting when you're non-biased, each stage has its pros and cons. Just as there's always a day and a night. But if you just get tired of the entire dynamic of that whole wave of day and night, and everything in between, that's when you go into that other space. And so that's, if what changes these worlds then, Tom, can only be one thing, and that's that other space. So once the knowledge of this comes out, that means it's the time for the opening of the exit to what's known as worlds or words, and getting into these spaces that don't have this level of communication and dividing and cutting in order to progress. You see? And so this is big time. Excuse me there. I did cut off for just a minute because I got a little one. I'm not sure if the mic is catching it, but I got one just demanding right now that they get some attention from mommy. So I'm sure that's going to happen in just a moment, just in case anyone's catching in that background. That's real life, my friend. That's grounding. You definitely, some people say, oh man, how do you, man, I'm extremely grounded, and with more ground, amplification is greater. Like, that's how I used to work with them old stereos we used to put in the car with the big speakers. They were like, where's your amplifier? It's like right there. It's like, man, it's not cranking out like it's supposed to. It's like, oh, you got it grounded to the other side of the battery. You need to tie that thing down to the car.
Yeah. And Sevan, do you think there's a point that we'll get to where we're able to flip that proverbial 100th monkey switch on some level with some concept?
Without a doubt, man, it's already happening. I'm pinpointing to you exactly how it happened. That basically one person flew through the envelope. It probably wasn't even me. Even though, there's always a mini game going. I call it the mini game. The mini game is always who gets out first, because then if you get out first, you get more space credits. But serious, like something broke the envelope, and it has something to do with those towers. And once that hole was opened up, some things did come in, but also some things went out, because that's how everything works. And that's why people need to realize that when you see something crazy, that means that there's a large amount of the opposite energy that can be harnessed at that moment. Right. Okay, and I think in that 9/11 period, a lot of that energy was not harnessed the proper way. And so it stayed stored up for a while. And it caused a collective buildup that burst within like 2 years after it. And that caused this, it was like a call. And, in some cases, like for my call, it came through ultraviolet light. And at that point, I had a deja vu that lasted 5 minutes, and it had such an impact on everything about my being. It changed me from there. It literally, I just changed directions in my auric field, and then from that point, I was extremely right-brained. Like, I was hearing my own consciousness explain to me things that were things I couldn't see and nobody else could even know. And so that's when I knew, like, it had gotten, like I talk about it sometimes, I got so crazy, I even beat on the mirror one day because I just knew there was another side, and I was actually hearing what was on the other side, but I just got tired of playing the game. Because what happens is that, I've always been very resilient in my consciousness to find truth, because even when I was in the Christian system, or even in merging into the Gnosticism, there was a lot of experiences that I was having in that environment that if anyone else, I'm assuming, was having those experiences, they would believe that is the absolute truth in the end, in the beginning to everything, and just stay there.
Been there, done that.
Exactly, right? So I've always been one of the person to pass in the cards and say, well, it looks like we didn't get a full house this time. And they're like, what are you talking about? You got a couple of pairs. And it's like, but it's still a couple of pairs. Let's go for the full house. And it's just an all or nothing mentality. And honestly, that's what this thing is really tied into, this whole Zen and zone imbalance. It's all or nothing. Because nothing is no thing. And when a person is actually comfortable with that, they've also reached that same point of being comfortable with everything. You see? And so, but this is not, some people confuse this for other stuff, though, and that's how tricky English is. Some people confuse this for being passive. Some people confuse this for not protecting themselves. Some people confuse this for, all sorts of different stages in between when you finally achieve it. And so that's also the quest. That's what I'm on, is to, climb as much as possible this beanstalk and then get directly into the center and keep moving my way up and staying in balance and not falling into the different klapot or the different downfalls of each different sphere that you step into a point where you master it. Because, and if so, to answer the question, yes, you could get to a point of mastery where you see the blueprint for what it is, and then you spiral out. And like I said, the thing is that the partying is going on there now, man. See, like when I get a chance to get into the high frequencies and all of it, like mainly in nature, because, you know, things that are built by man's hands got some issues. It's their vibration. So, you know, we see it as a computer. We see it as a pair of headphones. When your third eye is open, you see it as a wave that can't move it to but a certain frequency. It can't go any higher, so it can't reverberate with you. It can't resonate. And this is the real deal. So you have to get somewhere where when you send off your frequency, it bounces off of something that resonates with you, mainly nature, because it is you. And then it goes on ad infinitum. And this is, you know, I would tell people still, you know, and this is just work we're doing, but I don't like the ones that come forth and start lying to people and explain to them that the common stage that you can reach in meditation is likened unto the third eye. No, it's just not. Like there's something else going on. We're still digging into it, but it seems like the body is missing some kind of gland, and it's beyond it's different than the pineal gland. Pineal and the pituitary glands are not the only glands. There's some secretion, mainly the one. Well, actually, let me recant on that, because the pineal gland does produce dimethyltryptamine, and obviously that is the substance that is a catalyst to the person's energetic system. So if the body is generating that naturally, then they would actually always be in the stage of third eye. And so that very well may be, just like many have claimed. So I'm, again, just straightening this out. Many have claimed it's the gland that's causing the problem. But I'm thinking myself through this, by the way, based on my own experience. That couldn't be true, because with a certain stage, when the catalyst is applied, you have that ability to see and interact with things that are around you, you know, that's very expanded. And then it just turns off at a certain period.
Right.
Showing that you're not somehow producing something that allows it to catalyze. So, you know, but it's not even so much as that, because remember that would be like looking at it from a surface level. If you went deep into it, there's still something, mainly duality,
that keeps dragging you back down here.
Yeah, it's tearing the frequency down. And this is what, you know, and this is, again, speaking from experience, I just got to remember stuff here. But in one experience I was having, I was trying to process this island, meaning I was actually, third eye was wide open, and I was looking at this island, and it was something, but I couldn't tell what it was, because I was trying to put some kind of framework around it. Like I was basically trying to find the eyes. That's how we do. We look for the eyes first to kind of map out what we're looking at. And I couldn't actually find the eyes. And then I felt this strain within my consciousness, and I also felt my frequency starting to go down. And then the higher self kicks in, and, you know, it's almost like the higher self is like a comic or something. It's like, yeah, look at you, man. You're not the Prius. You're definitely not the Prius of the bunch. You're burning tons of energy. Like, look what you're doing. You're in duality. It's because you're trying to shape, fold, cut. You're trying to shape, form, fashion, and cut this entity that's multiple entities. And the other thing is, you've never seen these entities before, so you can't even put them into your scope. So now what we're going to do is we're going to explain to you very briefly about the Eye of Ra and what it really means. In the Eye of Ra, there's all the geometry that is used to form and shape the eyes of all these what's called sentient beings. Okay? And so if you notice in your vision, at about 60 degrees, 140 degrees, you stop. You can't see what's behind you unless you turn around. This is like a spiritual thing, though. So now notice, even with your third eyes and all your different eyes open, there's still a range of what you can see. And this is because you haven't become omniscient. You're still in duality, just not as bad right now, even though you're burning up fuel massively. But think about it, what I'm saying. And those who heard my message right now, think about what I'm saying. If we burn fuel by staying in duality, then we never have the ability to ascend, because that takes thrust. And thrust is trust, because what happens is that if you're not sure about where you're going, you always are worried about if you're going to fall. Think about
Right.
most people that try to fly in the dream. Like, there'd be like a building right there. You look down off the building and you're like, oh, hell no. And then, but a real flyer, you know, gets used to taking that leap. And we feel the inertia. Meaning in the dream, you've fallen before, you feel the squiggly, funny feeling in the stomach, right? So, you know, as a sidebar, you know, that's even what we're working with now, just in making virtual reality useful for something. They've already crossed into those boundaries, but a person being in VR for a few days, just flying, they're going to start flying in the dream. It's much better than staying on the ground. Like, I'm working on getting out of here. I'm working on progressing with this. Like, people that come around me and always tell me, oh, no, stop doing that. Oh, no. We got one of them. And it's not meaning that you do everything, because that's also not a pass at all for that everything that, what did they say? That everything that has a... The saying is basically that thinking that everything that has some kind of rule to it presents the limitation. You see what I mean? Because after a while, there starts to become another all-pervading consciousness that you got to kick out, that basically starts saying, well, shoot, anything that I can't do is a limitation. And what I'm really working towards is no limitation. So This means club, this means whatever I want to do tonight. And the reality is that no, that's not actually whatever you want to do. That's whatever lunacy under the lunar body that you want to do with the lords of the water, aka Jehovah. And that's another thing, you know, and this is, you know, this brings it home. Let me see what time it is, because, you know, I forgot all about this part of the message. It didn't even make it to the notes, so that's how fresh it is. Okay, so this is the conclusion of it, because we're near the end of the conversation. So in this particular program, especially for those who've accepted and adapted some of the Abrahamic template work and traditions, what you're dealing with is Luciferian versus Jehovians, okay? And before you go and point the finger and blame and judge someone, you should see these energies as inside of the person. The Jehovian fields are water. That's why there's the deluge and all these different things going on. It's all about water. It's all about the flow. It's all about, you know, the warmness and, you know, all of the saturation and, you know, all of the smothering and all of what goes on in that, from positive sphere to the negative sphere. But in the Luciferian fields, which are basically Cain. So, by the way, Jehovians are those of Abel. Luciferians are those of Cain. And the Cain is a smith, so basically a craftsman that deals with fire and heat. And that's why in the story of the Hiram Abiv, that when he looked into the molten sea, he saw his great ancestor Tubal-Cain in the fire. And Tubal-Cain told him, hey, come jump in the fire. And he recognized Tubal-Cain as being his father. See, what they're saying is that same thing you see in Dark Vader, is that Cain, who's the king, who's the Khan, who's the Cohen, who's the first priest king, who's still alive, because nothing dies, especially old Deuce, that is always magnified within the king, queen of any of the rulers in the world. It possesses them because it is a certain frequency. So Alexander the Great, the immortal Charlemagne, Constantine, all these individuals were the same sequential being known as the Lord Jehovah, who is basically a water being. And that's why you get the fish and the papacy and the pope hats and the pea, the Lord of the seas and all of these different maritime laws, the dock, birth, vessels on land, courthouses, courtship, aristocracy, wigs. I mean, the whole regalia. You see? So it is all so summed up in the world of Jehovah under the sphere of the dominion of the moon. You see, and that's the city, they call that Sin City. You see? And so then you can span out more. So it's like a galactic adventure. See, that's what I'd rather go on. Like we don't dock the craft and you know run aground, and this is, you know, that you're getting stuck. You're an adventurer. You know what I mean? If you feel grounded to anything, throw them on the ship. No, I mean, in that serious. It's like, you know, you have to also realize that you are responsible in many tenses to pave this way for, if you love somebody, for them to maybe even get a hint of how you travel down it. So basically the greatest gesture that you could ever give someone is to explore spirituality wherever that takes you. And maybe, just maybe, and I say maybe because there's really no proof, you may be able to do something for another person that still hasn't come to their senses from the other side. But last time I checked, we kept sending them warnings, but they could not perceive it. What am I talking about? If a being has reached another frequency, okay, and then you're not on that frequency, it could be yelling at you, but you're not going to hear it.
Right.
That's the limitations of the eye. And this is what I was being explained. That's why you see the goat's eye is different. It's sidereal because it's from Uranus. The cat's eye is different because it's a hybrid between a snake and a cat. Obviously, the human eye is circular. And then what these eyes do is they actually create the wavelength. And that is already a hard-coded perceived separation between us and those other entities. And this is what creates basically this multiple layer temple or multiple layer world, that one thing is subsisting off of another. That's what's called the harmony. But this harmony has that keyword harm in it for a reason, just like the universe has that keyword verse in it for a reason. Verse meaning against and fighting. Harm meaning somebody got hit in the face. And that's because the natural nature still of the dualistic planes is two opposing forces interacting with each other, creating friction, which creates actually steam, because you got the Luciferian forces swearing that they're going to do it all, and then you got the Jehovian forces swearing that they already did it. And then when both of them get together, they just blow off a bunch of steam. So I'm done with that. Just so people know, from me, don't be coming at me with none of this judgmental stuff about these two forces, because I'll explain it continuously, and that may be the best that I'll do in this next segment of the adventure. But I'm definitely not jumping on one of these sides, because I've also watched myself oscillate between those fields as I've worked to achieve the balance. But it's much more easier to say, so somebody says, hey, you want to read this? And I say, so what is it? Give me the ratio. Oh, 60% Luciferian, 40% Jehovian. Okay, I guess I'll go for it. Let me check it out. You see, I'd rather put it into a compressor like that, so that I can sum up all of this spiritual knowledge that's really out here and get to where things really are. You know what I mean? And it's a serious thing, because I need to put some kind of template over it that's making it a lot more simplified than this multiple button, not to say anything about Marco Rodin and Vortex Ahelia and Jane mathematics and, all these numbing numbers, and that's also that side of the consciousness that starts to really break things down so much that we don't even know what it was when it started. And, we're trying to find something in space dust. I don't want to play those kind of games, and somewhere we won't play those kind of games.
I find that, it's that whole thing, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. And that's just phase locking into a frequency. I mean, we've talked about it, I guess, a lot tonight, so it kind of solidifies it that when we move up into these other frequencies, something else that's generally non-visible to everything else appears. And this is always not in a spooky way. It could be that when you hear this message, you actually get what's going on, why somebody else is looking at you like, oh my goodness, he's gone crazy. And then on top of that, you're over there thinking, I wonder if they think I'm crazy because he just said that.
I get that story. I've lived that story already, because about I guess it's about 4 years ago now, my daughter came up to me and she said, Dad, you're not crazy. And she at this point, she's like 27, 28 years old. Her whole lifetime, she's thought, Dad's crazy. He's off into some real weird shit.
Yeah. And then just naturally, the kind of beings we are, we have a real receptor for that. Obviously in every instance, it's your daughter, but there's always that line going in. Even when you're even talking and you're doing things, there's a frequency present that actually is the portal of, I think he's crazy. And people need to understand this, that you can isolate yourself from many of these portals, but if you can't do it physically, but if you can't do it in your mind, you haven't gone anywhere. And in fact, generally when you get into that quiet space, that's when it invades. Mm-hmm. And that's why most people, they stay talking about other people busy in the external reality, because for the moment when they're sitting still, now they're calling it ADHD, but they're just inundated with the mind's, rapid approach at trying to either figure out what they're going to do to have that immediate gratification, but more deeper, the immediate gratification directs connectly, etherically to where is the energy source we're running out. It's like, I want to feel young. I guess if young is interpreted as this, and that's why you can see that these bodies, and this is, they call this, the soul in love with the animal bodies. Because what happens is that you can have so many bodies just running off in different directions. And people need to understand that. It gets so replete, you have complex dreams. I mean, even the grass is there. Even the little fissure in the wall, the drop from the sink, the actual calcium that builds up on the side, the dishes. Last time they've been done, you were able to tell. You even see the date on the refrigerator. You see, so the dream is so complex, but what have we gotten here? What have we done? And especially if all of us cannot enjoy it, because we're not saying it's something wrong to create these multiplicit dreams and have your experiences in them. We're just saying that wake up, because that's not the whole thing. And I think that's really when you merge these two concepts together. Because even inside of ourselves, we got the Luciferian Jehovian battle going on. Even right now, they constantly wage war with one another. That is reflected in the world right now. That's what you see: Luciferians versus Jehovians, and it's not as fun when you're involved. When you're out of it and you're looking at it non-biased, it's very interesting to begin to introspect on, and looking at inside of yourself, because the external world, you can't do anything about that from the outside. At least like what David Icke said then, he said, you're trying to change the hologram from inside the hologram. You need to go where it's being projected from. So, now we get a chance to see, even on a symbolic level, where that projection from our soul, ourselves, the sun, whatever, spraying out this entire dualistic reality of yin and yang, and definitely making us make a choice, or making ourselves make a choice that's supposed to move us into just another part of duality. The ultimate choice is only one thing, coming in unison. The only thing that's in unison, and you see it's in there, the only thing that's in between that is all of our choices and our decisions until we make it to that point, and we call that life, which is a lie. The words are all constructed. The lie is you live and it's evil. Like the whole thing is really there, and it's just so blunt. Because it's like what I was saying in the beginning of the conversation. You're like, well, no, live doesn't connect to evil. No. Life is not a file. No, you got it all wrong. It's oh no, we didn't threw a rock at his crystal castle over there. you didn't become a devil over there. You really believe that the whole illusion is real, and you're divided. And this, like I said, we can't take it as the Eastern traditions, like the Upanishads are giving it, but it's right there. They're like, yeah, it got real bad. Like Lord Brahm had split himself up into Brahm and Saraswati, and then they had the son Krishna, and they opened up an entire world of war, and they were all fighting each other because Brihaspati left the assembly, and then Hanuman got upset that they killed the villagers and Shana. It's just like, but then some people think this is just fanciful until you read the book about Earth. It's like, and Keisha went over there to Trina's house and shot her, and then went back to the place, and then that ended up causing ripple effects because she didn't go to her job in the morning, and so the other guy that was supposed to come in didn't. And then you see, and then if you're hearing this story like 100 parsecs into the future, you probably say, that sounds like a myth. The Keisha, what kind of name is that? And this is ad infinitum. So this is where I was saying the maturity comes in, because when you step into maturity, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? This is like, what's his name? Jason in the Argonauts, when Jason woke up on the island of the Amazons. And then, but he had been, he said, well, he said, how long have I been here? He said, oh, don't worry about it. He said, no, serious, how long have I been here? He said, you've been here for hundreds of years. What? I had a wife. Thinking she's gone now. But serious, it's like when you start waking up to what's really going on here, it's like, hey, you can't really stay in a duality forever, my child. And I think that's really maybe we've cracked into it then. What duality was, because it's going to be a past tense thing, is when the energy and the level of ability becomes so powerful, you can't handle it. And that's like the first part of division, because you can always deal with it with everyone together. But once someone starts breaking a chain and you start breaking a chain, then you can't handle even what you have. And then so duality is created because you divide the energy. Okay, you take some of it, I'll take other. You go, my son, you take half, and they call that the inheritance, right? You take what I have, and when you get of age, and then it's yours. You see what I mean? So this whole act that we are in is very sacred. We do act it out still now in a very, a very different kind of way, but the underpinnings are still there. And so, that's really all I have to say today is that, welcome home to everyone, to your inner self. And you can go beyond now because there's now no more dweller at the gate. Because if you realize the dweller creates the judgment and the judgment is what's standing at the gate, once you stop judging, then you can walk through. And then just realize that the grace is sufficient, meaning that don't go into burning up your brain about if that one little thing in particular, that spike in the frequency that you keep remembering in your panorama is going to be the exception. Because in reality, I don't care who thinks they're doing good here, they're also doing evil. There's no way they could not do it if they were to remain cohesive. And then what happens is when you start moving out of that frequency, you actually do become non-cohesive, meaning that it's known that many of the masters were having a very difficult time staying congealed. Like many of them subject to departicleize right in front of you because it's all an illusion. So you have to take on this mantle. And that's also why I have a lot of real endowed respect for the metaphoric masters. Okay, because I'm not trying to bring anybody out into the external plane. I've already seen the dangers of that. So the reality is that it's internal, and so this is, we're on our way, man. I won't say anymore because I probably could keep going on and going on, and then we dive into something else, and how that works.
That's one of the things I love about you, though, Sevan. You get plugged in and look out. Here comes some truth.
Yeah, man. But in this case, we did cover some, we covered some expanded ground. Like I was looking at this, and there was supposed to be a little note. The last note for people that need to know how in which this is possible, meaning like these streams and all this kind of stuff. And it's because that grid, okay, and this grid is called the Hartman grid, okay? The Hartman grid is basically the etheric grid that etheric consciousness is traveling down. And the reason why there goes they, so it was really us, didn't really want us to know about it is because it's generally used for what we call today magic, especially dark magic. So when someone's trying to do something to another person, where on an energetic level, that energy is traveling through the Hartman grid. So because that already brought the knowledge that there was this grid that was organic, that was Gaia's web, that we all could tap into, and that linked us up in unison.
Where's this terminology Hartman grid come from?
Let me pull that for you. So it's like there was one word I was going to use, but the Hartman grid is named after the gentleman. And I'll go to Wikipedia very briefly. And this is, of course, the most common terminology for this particular grid. But the grid itself is a specific geometric design based on certain degrees. And then when you draw it out, you notice that every part of the grid, as you're drawing it out using the compass, is some major point going on there. And this is not even based on Google Earth today. This is based on the old geological maps. And even today, those are always areas where basically it's a portal. And there's either it's coming in or coming out. And portal as in a port, like the same thing as your nose, but the Earth has one. Right. And it's one that's going in and there's one that's going out. And if you can do certain things on different ones. And this is why even Detroit has one in the center of the city. And there's a portal there. There's actually a Stargate, a real Stargate there, and standing stones. This makes you know that it's also not some kind of archaeological or architectural design. It's a real portal. But that's, of course, why you would clear everyone out of a city. And we're not going to start any theories and conspiracies here, but I'm just, just adding more credibility to what's already documented about this grid that's running through the earth. And so if you understand those lines, then you also understand the primary arteries of space, because there's really no such thing as space, and that's a whole nother episode. But what you're looking into is really the ocean. It's just basically it's like a mirror. They call this the looking glass. That's why Alex has to go across the looking glass. That's why we know this world to be an illusion. We know it to be dualistic because it is an image of something perfected. And as it moves further away from that perfection, it loses light. So it loses its consistency. Thus, it divides itself. And so notice what I just explained. You can do a flashlight like that, proving it's the truth. You put it real close to the wall, then you start pulling back. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker as the light diffuses, almost to the point where you can't even see the light. That's where some humans are. And so what happens is when we add more amperage and we jump this thing off, like the universe, there's a way to turn on the universe. I'm not sure what it would do. It's like, yo, this was the guy. I just caught a vision on something, man. It's hilarious. But imagine getting pinned with, you turned on the universe. You're like a big cosmic, device, and you just kick that thing off. Just start circumambulating all the planets until all the frequencies are going all high. I bet you would be back there like the lady on Contact. We're okay to go. I'm okay to go. Because, that's, some of the expressions, and it tends to when you're just holding on and the centers of the bodies turn on. So in conclusion, I'll tell people this. This is something that, again, it's not the fanciful tales, even though it comes out being an adventure. Every single human being on this planet, when they return themselves into sovereignty, have this as their inheritance. There is nothing to take from Caesar. Render what is to Caesar back to Caesar. Oh, JC, Julius Caesar, Jesus Christ, John Carter. There's, that Messiah-based metaphor. There's nothing to really get into the whole judgment thing about. You see, so these are also the keys to how one progresses out of the matrix. And I think we've talked about a lot of this today. And so just remember, it's one of those things that you constantly got to be on yourself about. It's good to come up with some kind of mantra that basically tells you two opposites. Evil is good is bad. It's all indifferent. Like, why am I even focusing on that? What should I be doing? Like, I'm letting the brain burn this whole thing up right now. Let me get to something. And reinforcing yourself with that and just being real and true with yourself, not trying to pretend, because that's another part of the judgment. The judgment is when you pretend because you've judged yourself also to need to be in a certain stage for other people. Man, this thing gets crazy. Like, when you really start pulling it apart, you realize that even you're also looking for confirmation sometimes from other people to judge that what you've done is okay.
Right.
Hey, I like that show. Hey, I like what you did yesterday with that. Oh, and then, but because because if they say, hey, I didn't like that, you catch a feeling. There's a frequency change. So this is, this is also how you hunt a dweller down. Like, remember, this being is live and active. I'm not talking about no crazy stuff here. This being is so sneaky. He never comes up until you're about to leave, really. Other than that, it's always playing in the background, the verdicts. It's just like the how the whole thing works now with the whole the money and the banking and all that kind of stuff. It's all in the background for a while, just operating. Nobody knew edgewise now what's going on. Wondering why these folks like to have your insurance. They love to get your insurance. That's the highest pay-per-click on the internet is an insurance ad. Why? Because once you say someone else is basically your insurance, not you, oh man, that's one of the greatest things that you can do to give up your soul. I mean, it's a real deal. You see what I mean? So the fears and things that are tied into it, if I die and, it just keeps going on and on. Like we got to see what we're doing and how this stuff actually manifests on another spiritual level before we can become sovereigns. And just remember that our parents have gone through a phase. They've trudged through something just as sure as amoeba walked his way through reptile. They've trudged through something that they've worked to get to this point to where they can reclaim their sovereignty inside their mind from the judge. Because remember, like this judge character, and I'm not going to get you into the back and forth, but is the creature from the Bible. That's why it's called Jupiter. Ju is the first two words in the word judge. In Africa, they called him Juju.
Right.
It meant you were going to lose something. You see, so the judgments and the whole Jupiterian council, and I'm the biggest planet. You see, that was the whole, that's the rights of Caesar, right? That's Julius. You see, they don't deviate. That's the crazy part about this, is they don't deviate. So once you crack that code, oh man, you broke the matrix. And then it just, at your speed of realization, though, remember, and this is, the last thing, I keep saying that, but remember this, and I talk like it's my last time. Remember this, that what happened with me in this tree, I just have to explain it very briefly, is that this tree was very large and it was another life form. And I wasn't ready because I was in the physical. So versus in the astral plane and in the dream worlds, I'm very equipped. But in the real world, and closer I get to the real reality of paranormal phenomena, I'm still building up to that. And this one was, it was there. It was ready to communicate. And I was like, man, I'm not even in the position yet to really look this thing in the face. And what it did was, and again, look at this all as a metaphor, even though it really happened. But remember always to see things in the metaphor so you don't spike your energies and miss the point. So what happens is that I could see it there. The eyes and everything were clearly defined, but it didn't move. Even though I reached the frequency where it could move. And you can tell that just by the entire field around you and many of the other things that were on the ground and in the grass and things that had began to animate themselves. And then I realized, especially from my geographical position, actually, because we went deep into the forest, that I was actually in this being's den. So I was already also, just logically telling myself, the logical brain was still functioning, man, you're not even tactically in the right position. Look what you've done. You've gone and got yourself into this thing's den. And then, because when we came into this part of the jungle, we didn't really, none of this was perceived because we hadn't gotten to that stage of frequency yet. We were working on that. So in conclusion, what I realized was the reason why, and you can pick this up in the field, that it didn't even move is because it was gentle. That it knew the power of being smooth. And this is something that I took as a lesson that day about how we run up sometimes on people with one of these stories about the Twin Towers falling down. And then how after you explain that to them, very promptly the two towers inside of them, the Jachin and the Boaz, fall down too. Because it's just so flooring for them to believe what you just told them about their country. You see what I mean? So we have to learn how to be smooth and gentle with this message. That's, in a sense for ourselves, extra points is your delivery. Because if you just want to tell people right away as soon as you get off the phone call, and guess what? I told you y'all was incorrect about that whole thing, and let me show you. And the person then laid it all out, and they're just crushing these people's
walls
ego.
go up, defenses.
Yeah. I mean, and at least that's going on. But if they penetrate, because remember, most of these people are always working to get to the stage of penetration when they can crack this person's shell. And if they happen to, and they haven't soft-boiled it, basically, then there's drama that ensues. And so we need to be aware of this. This is also what keeps people from being able to get into certain frequencies and seeing certain things. And it's because how they would flare that on everyone else, they wouldn't be gentle. Because, again, with that experience with the tree, what it subconsciously explains is where when you're ready to meet me, holler at me. But just understand, you're not the only one out here. And the other thing was, because it did have a quasi story before I was coming out of that frequency and on that wavelength, that says, now if you look, you can see that I'm moving. And sure enough, you could see the branches coming out of the ground somewhat like feet. But in our reality, it's just there as a tree with branches coming out of the ground. And the real reality, when the eyes are single, it was a tree on a progressive move. And it said the reason why I'm on the move is because man is building things in this other direction. And sure enough, the direction that it was moving away from, there's a subdivision coming up. So there's a plight with nature. And I'll just, say it as it is. Nature is at a point where it is attempting to communicate with certain people that may be able to assist in the situation of their space, which is like dream time, is being completely destroyed because we're moving in man-made objects that carry man-made frequencies that take that plane off frequency. And thus, when that's unplugged, that unplugs the Hartman grid, if people want to understand. So the gaps and the breaks in the Hartman grid, or the organic grid that pervades the world that makes us all feel safe, those breaks are in areas where things have been constructed, made by man's hands, that are not resonating the frequency that's necessary to keep that connected. And the way to connect that, to patch that, if you may, that's why the last level is called a bridge builder, or the bridge, is the individual that works like glue in between those spaces in the grid and connects it with their own being. And so that's what we're doing. That's, if you could say, a great work. That's what the great work is to reestablish the organic grid with humans functioning with balanced humans functioning as human orgone, in order to connect that across great distances, to answer the quote unquote prayers that many of the people on the lower vortexes have to the gods, or basically the beings that are above them. And if you really think about it, that's why I say, yes, ye are gods. We talked about that earlier in the conversation. What you could do for another person, if you had some kind of connection to them, and you really had a connection to them, would be amazing, even with the few dollars that you make now. And so this is another important thing to remember, is that we do take this position as being, even if you're American, an American is an Amir, an immortal serpent. They weren't playing around when they named this country what it was, because the people that came from it, people need to understand it's not about getting on the side of one country or another, but the reality is, if a person's in the Western state of consciousness and then they finally wake up, because West is where the sun sets, homie. So if they wake up from where the sun sets, that's like saying they actually completed the entire circuit. And this is, all westernized spheres. So that's why that whole movement, the west wind is a strong wind. It blows a person about. It has a lot of different experiences tied into it. But you notice why they show the winds. Some people read those old maps and they always see the winds on the corners, and they're shaped like, they're like clouds, blowing clouds, and they're shaped like men or animals, right? And this is because the wind is synonymous with what changes things. And, and when a wind blows a certain way, like the west wind, meaning the Western culture, Western frequency, then it equals certain kind of changes in the world. And so
the winds of change.
For sure. That's it, the wind of change. So that's it. It's 2 hours and 38 minutes, I believe, and I'm sure that people are ready to go ahead and contemplate some of what was said, or just relax into it and realize that, they are it, and, and start tapping into that oneness, and get ready to, ascend themselves, and then, come back in again. It's not good and bad. So once you do that, you're in all spaces.
There we go. Yeah. Well, hey, Sevan, man. Oh, yeah, I'm going to have to go through this a few times myself, because there's an awful lot there that we covered tonight.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think the last show I did was actually on your station. I think I did one show in between them, but it's definitely worthy of I believe personally, but it's definitely worthy of another follow-up to what we were talking about last time.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I had I got a good one there just at the end. I think I finally understand grid workers now, thanks to you. Well, so, and your explanation of the Hartman grid. So, gracias for that, sir.
Okay, con gusto.
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Hey,
I wanted to say thanks to everyone. I know you're probably going to ask me to shout out the site really briefly, or unless you were going to say something else. Go ahead.
Go for it. No, go for it. Okay, I was going to ask you to do that, actually.
Well, yeah. I think we did it a couple times during the conversation, but if anyone's coming in towards the end, you can pretty much find all the links at astroquest.com, especially to the archive and the information. We also have a podcast on Podomatic, so you can probably type in Podomatic Astral Quest in your Google and you'll find it. Obviously, we're launching the new site. We're hoping to get up and running by January. It's just a massive thing. Like you can imagine what I was talking about today, and then bought into the flesh. You know, that's see, that's what I think that if anyone ever wonders at all, like I may be missing from some place or something like that, just remember I'm bringing something that's a massive projection. I'm birthing it into a reality. And so this requires you to have to really do the physical stuff behind putting this kind of thing together and getting the right people involved. So, you know, I hope that we can pick up some steam, especially in January, with getting more people aware of what we're doing so that we can, you know, just get more support at putting this together. And then, like I said, it's open source. So what you get is, let's say, for instance, all of what was explained today was in the proper categories. And then also people were adding themselves to the body of work. And not only that, actually correcting certain things that weren't bought for the proper way, but just need to be moved around a little bit, and it'll ring truth perfectly. So what you would get then is within, you know, no time, 6 months max, you would have a perfected system based on individuals that have had the experience, a perfected system that can answer the real questions to life that are spiritually related, all the way into lifestyle, which is physically related. So not missing any of the points of our existence. So I believe that the zero is the mind, because the mind is it's really endless. Like it can really go on a fantastic adventure all by its lonesome. And then the body, who is number two, and the body is dual. And we know about that enough from today. And then the one, which is the soul. So it shows you in the word that something is right about this equation, because the soul means one. And so it shows you how these three parts of the body, the mind, body, and the soul, are the primary points in which you move from. And then from those points, you keep creating yet more things. So if you want to go into yourself, you would look at those two bottoms of that triangle and start to merge it all the way to that point, and then properly hit that ejector seat. And then what's beyond that point is much more vast than words.
Right. Right. All right, man.
Okay.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us here
Thank you, Tom.
again, and thank you for everybody out there for participating.
For sure. It's been
I definitely
excellent.
feel the participation. So good stuff, Sevan.